Good evening and welcome to the City Council meeting for the City of San Carlos Redevelopment Agency, August 28th, 2006. We've just come back from interviews. That's why we had, we were a little tardy here getting started. Appreciate everyone's patience. We are going to start here with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our next item is changes to the order of the agenda. Council, any changes that are recommended, or staff?
We have none.
None? Okay. And Mr. City Attorney, do you want to report from closed session? Anything?
Direction was given and no action was taken in closed session tonight.
Thank you. Next item is council communications and announcements. Why don't we start down here with Vice Mayor Davids.
We have two items. This afternoon I attended a meeting of the Congestion Management and Environmental Quality Committee. This is a committee of the City and County Government Association. And one of the significant actions we took this afternoon was to approve the process whereby CCAG, the City and County Governments Association, will reimburse to the city up to $50,000 for planning the El Camino right-of-way. This is part of the Grand Boulevard program. A lot of action going on in terms of what El Camino could be in the future. And there is $50,000 available for all the cities who participate. It is a matching fund. However, the matching can be in the form of staff time or some other less tangible than dollars. So I'm sure that Liz will have an opportunity to deal with this, and hopefully we can qualify for that reimbursement, or that add-on, rather. The other is just a notification to the public and to our council that the 22nd Annual California Coastal Cleanup Day will be Saturday, September 16. That's September 16 from 9 to noon. And there will be various cleanup locations in San Mateo County, along the bay and in the creeks. So I would encourage everyone who can to turn out for that half a day, September 16, and to give a hand to the coastal cleanup. There's literally hundreds of thousands of pounds of stuff that gets picked up every year through this process. It's a lot of fun, and we do some good for the environment. So we'll encourage folks to consider that for their Do Good September 16th event.
Is there a website for that, Tom?
Let's see it.
Some kind of...
www.flowtothebay.org. That should get you to a home page, and then from there you can find out the locations, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
A couple of items. Just I attended an event. I guess it was last. I can't remember the day. The mayor was there also, where we installed or initiated 6 new firefighters for our Belmont San Carlos Fire Department. And I'm not sure that we're at exactly full strength right now, but we're darn close. The average experience of those 6 firefighters is over 5 years, each of them. So they're not rookies, except perhaps with some of the procedures that we're doing in our department. They're all up and running as of a week ago. And so just another add-on to the staffing of making sure that our fire stations are manned all the time. The other thing is, I also attended a meeting, speaking of the Grand Boulevard. There was I'm the delegate from the city to the Grand Boulevard Commission, and we had our meeting, I guess it was last Wednesday, and it's a fascinating process. It's going to take a long time, but we've got every city on the peninsula, including Santa Clara County, involved in this, and it's something that I think is going to be something that we're going to really want to watch and see how we can all work together to make El Camino Real not look the same in every city, but just improve the entire length of it and make it a real grand boulevard. And the third thing I had was On September 7th, this is sort of a request from my fellow council members. On September 7th, it's a Thursday, I was scheduled to be the representative of the City Council for the Hot Harvest Nights booth. And I'm going to be in San Diego at the League of Cities convention, which I was selected for that, or should I say I volunteered for that last month. So if anyone can help me and pick me up on the September 7th time from 5 to 7 for our booth at the Hot Harvest Nights, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
I've sort of coasted through this process this year, so I'd be glad to cover you on the 7th.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Davies. I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's from when? That's from about
5 to 7.
Oh.
Yeah, 5 to 7. If you want to get there early. And
I was thinking maybe about 6 to 7, but 5 to 7. All right, I got it.
Thanks. That's all right.
Thank you. Councilmember Lewis? Nothing? Okay. Very good. I've got a couple of items. I did want to report that we did have the Mayor's Family Fun Bike Ride, get all the words in there, and we had well, I see Cheryl in the, do you have any further updated statistics on that? Okay. So we had over 100 participants, and we raised over $2,000, which will go to Pass Christian to support our adopted city there in their Katrina relief efforts. And so it was a very successful ride. A lot of volunteers put that together, especially a lot of work on their own personal time of Cheryl Pomerant, the Executive Director of the Chamber, and our Parks and Rec Director, Barry Weiss, worked hard on that. Appreciate everybody's volunteer efforts, and mostly appreciate all the 100 riders that came out and joined us on Sunday morning. We did have a cameo appearance by Councilmember Lewis, and Councilmember Vice Mayor Davids were there as well, cheering us on. So
It was more than cameo. I was really into it, yes.
Okay.
I was going to say, where's the cameo part coming? It was cold.
I was
You were there early?
And I was with you in spirit.
In spirit.
It was Sunday morning, so I was with you in spirit.
So thanks to everybody for helping that be a success. I wanted to report from the Airport Community Roundtable that they have changed their website. So if you're trying to get in touch with the Roundtable for any reason, they have a new website, which is sforoundtable.org. If you use the old address, you'll still be taken to it for the next year, but then after that it will expire. I also wanted to let folks know we gave a proclamation to Michelle Fry, who is a community service officer with the police department. We were going to do that tonight, but Michelle is, if I haven't said already, she's a naval reserve officer serving in Bahrain and Iraq, patrolling the waters there to keep them open and safe for both the ships that the Navy hires to bring in supplies and so forth, and other merchant ships in the area. And when she was coming back, returning from service, she got the notice that she has to go back out again. And she had to leave last Friday, so we weren't able to do the proclamation tonight, but we did it the other day with a number of city employees in attendance, and that was a good event for her to build up her spirits, having to ship out again and serve in Iraq. And I think it was a good time also for the city employees who were able to attend. We do have care packages going to her on occasion, and that is done through the police department. So if you have any interest in that, you could contact our chief of police, Greg Rothaus. And the next item I had was I received an email from a Barbara Anderson on some suggestions about notification and other items having to do with things we do with EDAC. And so I was going to pass this on to staff, and I know it's on our work program or our strategic plan, and perhaps we could add some of her comments and look at some of those with what we're doing in that regard. So I will pass that on to staff. And did other council members get copies of this email? Okay, you did? Okay, so is that a consensus that we could do that? Sure. Is that fine with everybody? Okay. And the last item that I had was we did receive an article, I believe we all received an article on entitled New York Gets Sobering Look at Its Pensions. This is something that we did, Bob and I have worked on at the Fire Board, is taking a sobering look at pensions, and hired Muni, I think it was, Mark, was it Muni Financial to give us a report? And I would suggest, yes.
Pardon me, it's Bartel for the report on that. Muni Financial is doing the assessment district.
So it was Bartel on the pensions. And I know when we did that at the Fire Board, Bob and I looked at each other and said, we should probably do that for the city as well. And so it's something that I think at some point we would want to have a discussion at the council level. Again, if I have the consensus of the council, that we would take a look at that.
That was it was I who copied the article to get out to everybody on the council, and I thought it'd be a good discussion to just sort of compare how we look at our pensions, how we account for them, and see how we're looking down the road, given what happened with the Fire Board. So I'd certainly be in support of that.
We actually are looking at that this year in the budget for the city of San Carlos. So we'll be taking a look at the financial obligations and trying to get a handle on exactly what those obligations are for accounting purposes into the future.
And just the accounting methodology, I think it'd be a good discussion just so we all understand how we do it. It'd be great.
Very good. So I think we have consensus on that item as well, and staff is already working on it. Okay, so that sums up my council reports. That brings us to the other side of things, which is reports to council, staff.
We have nothing other than the report from the fire chief on the status of the personnel.
Very good. This is Fire Chief Fry from the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department.
Chief, I hope I didn't steal your thunder.
I'll just skip that part. I got it, though. I had it on here.
You can repeat that. It's not a bad thing to repeat. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and Honorable Council, I'm honored and privileged to be a month into being your fire chief for Belmont San Carlos Fire, and it's not something I'm taking lightly, and it's a lot of hard work, and I anticipate a lot of hard work in the future. But this is the first of many times I hope to be here explaining and giving you updates on what's happening within the department, something that's kind of new that hasn't happened, and I'm looking forward to doing that. So over the course of the last month, we've held several meetings. The fire assessment is the hot topic these days. And that actually is going to be starting next week. That campaign will be kicking off next week. The Lou Edwards Group, which we've contracted with, is doing the mailings for the San Carlos and Belmont residents, and then those flyers will go out late next week, and another one later on in September that will be going out again. That is not counting what the fire department members are going to be doing as far as their campaign. The Lou Edwards Group is doing the unbiased information piece for both cities. Additionally, as Council Member Grisili mentioned, we hired 6. That was the 18th of August that we had the badge printing for those gentlemen. In addition, we hired 2 additional members back in the first part of July that came back to us that were laid off in 2003. So we hired 6 new ones and 2 returnees, which brought our staffing up considerably. On the flip side of that, we have some promotion activity scheduled for the next couple of months. Battalion Chief's promotional exam will be on October the 30th. I just firmed up today a captain's promotional examination on November 7th and 8th, which will be held jointly with Foster City Fire and Woodside Fire Department. So we'll be doing a joint fire captain's examination, and I'm expecting to be doing some of those promotions somewhere around the 15th of November. Which will put us right back to time to hire some new firefighters after we make all those promotions. There's 5 openings for promotions, 3 battalion chiefs, 2 fire captains that will be moving up. In addition, I've taken the opportunity with this month and the next couple of months to give all of the fire captains that are going to be testing the opportunity to work the position as an acting battalion chief and help prepare them a little better for the test that will be coming up in the end of October. So it's been some familiar faces this month. There'll be some new faces next month. And then the last of our remaining battalion chiefs, who's been here for about 26 years, will be leaving us, Chief Rich Price, at the end of September, going to San Juan Valley's promotion as assistant chief in that department. So that'll be the three openings we had. Chief Belville left back in May, and then with myself moving up. So there's 3 management positions that we'll be filling. So things are moving forward. We're progressing.
Very good. Any questions from the council?
I have a quick question. Of the new hires or rehires, how many of them are paramedic?
All of them. All 8. 3 of the ones that came from outside, 5 of the 8 came from within the county, so we could put them right to work. The other 3 came outside the county, and so there's some county accreditation hoops we need to jump through with getting them certified and accredited in the county. We anticipate that to take 1 to 2 months, and they'll get certified within the county, and then we'll have all 8 of them. Right now, they're kind of being partnered and mentored on county protocols.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, Vice Mayor Davids? No? Thank you very much, Chief. Appreciate it. Okay, that brings us to item 6A, which is council appointments and presentations. And although it's not listed here, and because I didn't report on it from our earlier time of interviews, I thought this would be a good time to announce that we did meet prior to being here on the dais for interviews for Economic Development Advisory Commission. We had 4 applicants for 1 position, and boy, I tell you, just like always, we always have a lot of good people come forward and volunteer in these interviews to serve the city, and we really appreciate it, and it always amazes me, I know it does the rest of the council too, the quality of individuals we have in this community who are willing to volunteer their time. With that, we did discuss who to assign or put on the committee, and we picked Mr. Harold, I'm going to butcher his last name probably, try the French pronunciation of it, Chouette. It's S-C-H-U-E-T-T-E. So he'll be serving the City of San Carlos on the EDAC, Economic Development Advisory Commission. And now what is on the agenda is to consider reappointment of 2 persons to the Parks and Rec Commission, item 6A.
I'd move approval of the incumbents for another term, Gordy Burton and Tom Johnstone.
Second.
Okay, discussion. I did meet with the city manager today about this because I took a look at Mr. Johnstone's terms and was comparing it to what our municipal code states. Now, the references to the municipal code are not printed quite correctly in here, but it's close. And the wording and the intent of the wording is the same. Tom has served 2 terms consecutively for a total of 6 years, a 3rd term consecutively where he was filling in a year and a half, which is 7.5 years. Then he took a break and has served and completed another 3-year term. So that's a total of 10.5 years. And the difficulty we have here as a council is our code states, municipal code states that a member may serve 3-year terms, but in no event exceed 9 years total, whether there's a break or not a break. And so we have a bit of an issue here. Mr. City Manager, do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, the issue seems to be the impact of the break on that term of service. And it's my understanding, I've been talking with the city attorney, it's my understanding that the rulings in the past has been that the break actually does create the opportunity or has been interpreted to create the opportunity for the tenure to start anew. And so that has been the ruling that the city has worked under previously. So with that, I would defer to the city attorney for any specific questions that you might have.
The question I would have is how binding is this municipal code? Can we, are we permitted to ignore the wording that's there that's pretty explicit? And despite what we've done in the past, it sounds like in the past we have done what is not in the code.
Well, this came up in the Planning Commission about maybe it was 6 or 7 years ago when we had a long-serving member, and I was asked that question then, and I spoke with the city attorney at the time, Bob Lanzone, and it was our judgment that if you read 2.24.060 as a whole, I know the language you're referring to because it came up then. It talks about consecutive service in a couple of places, and it just has that total, which we interpreted to be referring to the total service during that consecutive time frame. And I know the wording in this ordinance maybe could be a little clearer, but that was our call, and it's still our call that it refers to consecutive service. The last sentence talks about subject again to a limitation of 9 years of consecutive service. So it's one of those things where we believe the intent was to limit it to 9 years of consecutive service, which could be among more than just one commission, but it's 9 years consecutive time, and if there's a break, the 9-year clock can begin anew.
I was just going to mention through the chair that also was the interpretation of the prior city attorney. So we have had a number of cases, certainly since the time I've been here, where we've had instances where someone who took the 1-year break has served more than an aggregate total of 9 years. But I'd also observe that obviously since this is in the municipal code, it's always up to the council. You can amend the municipal code, obviously.
Any other comments from council?
No, I did read it last night as I was going through the agenda, and it was a little confusing. But the last sentence compelled me to stay tuned to the 9-year consecutive service without interruption. So I felt that this would be an appropriate extension to make. This would give him the third term, which would bring him to 9 years, and he wouldn't be eligible beyond this.
Yeah, I think if we look at cleaning up the language in the ordinance, my defining the break period is sort of the vacuum of information, because it does mention a couple times a consecutive service, but it doesn't define as what that break period is. I mean, is it a year? Is it a term? Is it whatever that might be? So I think we, at some point, should perhaps clean up the language in the ordinance so we understand it. But it does seem to be consistent with to interpret the way this is read, to interpret in that way, I think is appropriate.
Okay. Bob, any comments?
I agree with Vice Mayor Davids and Councilmember Lewis. I also, if you read the thing in once, as was said, in one lump total, if you read it partially, you sort of go like this, this, and this. Right. But in my opinion, it's the same thing. If you read it in total, it would be appropriate to reappoint Mr. Johnstone.
Okay. And just to be understood, my concern is that we don't just tread over our municipal code without any regard for it. This, I'm not concerned one way or the other about Mr. Johnstone. I know the guy and I'm friendly with him and so forth. But it's what I'm hearing from council is that there's enough ambiguity that we could continue to move forward as we have in the past and not be treading over our municipal code. But what I'm hearing from council is we need to clean up this language so that it's clear to everyone what it says and what it means, even if it means adding some kind of example or whatever to the language. But do we have a consensus then that we want this language brought back to us with something that is written more clearly?
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate.
Okay. And I would like to add something else for consideration, and I'll be looking for not a vote on this, but just consensus. Something I spoke to the city manager about is my feeling is that in this process of reappointment, whenever a position comes up for reappointment, we should also advertise and put it out to the community that we have these people who are up for reappointment, and we put out for invitations for folks to come in and interview. The thinking on my part is that just like when we run for city council and we finish our 4-year term, we're allowed to, of course, run again. And oftentimes when we do run again as incumbents, the history in San Carlos has been not too many people come forward and challenge the incumbents, but it does happen. But it is an opportunity for a sort of a redirection, an opportunity to get new people in, and so forth. And I wonder if we want to add that to our process as opposed to not advertising when we have these things coming up.
I might be on the other side of that thought process. Just I think we have the opportunity anytime to not reappoint, as we did tonight, or we do tonight rather, if we feel that the folks coming up aren't there. I think it's, I don't know, that's one that's hard for me to, if you can do that, but then it's sort of like you're, I don't know, if I was thinking about applying, I'd think to myself, why would they pick me over someone else? I don't know. That one's a tough one for me to think about. I'm not sure about that. I'd be interested to hear my fellow council members' thoughts on that if they have a moment to think to talk about it.
But I think if one of the goals I think for council I'd like to see is us meeting with the commissions on a little more regular basis, or certainly even two council members meet with the commissions on a more regular basis so we can work in concert better, which I think has been missing for the last several years. If we did that, I think when appointments came up like this, it wouldn't be simply like a rubber stamp. We would all feel maybe even better informed about the progress of how the commission is going and so forth. My concern with opening it up every time there's a reappointment is, and just for the public's education, that there's several commissions and several committees that we appoint. Some of those are in 2-year terms, 3-year terms. There's maybe a half a dozen times a year, maybe more, that we have reappointments. The staff time that it takes for interviews, the toll it takes on volunteers, not only those serving on the commissions, but not perhaps the fear of not being reappointed or being up for that. Or new volunteers coming in and being disappointed that they don't get that position. My concern is it's a cumbersome process. So, anyway, I would sort of be on the other side of that as well.
I see some discussion down there. Are we talking about this too much?
Probably just a little. We're thinking that it was good discussion, but we're thinking that if we're going to bring the item back for clarification in any event, the time for the discussion that we're having is probably best suited for when it's on the agenda for consideration for amendments to that particular code.
So would it be, and that's all I was looking for, is would it be okay with the council to bring it back for an item of discussion? We've had 2 council members already.
Right, and Tom, if you want to weigh in, we have a lot that we do as a council, and if we're hung up on it, let's bring it back, talk about it, but if Bob and I have talked about it, and we might as well just finish the discussion.
Well, in a word, I would agree with Council Members Lewis and Griselle at this point, although I have no objection to bringing it back for discussion.
Okay. I think that gives adequate direction. Just bring us back the code, the municipal code. Okay, that finishes item... wait. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Griselli.
I have to vote on the motion.
So we did have a motion.
Yes.
And we need roll call.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty is absent. Mayor Grocott?
Yes. That brings us to item 7A, which is presentations, and we have here Councilor Jamie Thiessen from our sister city of Okotoks, Alberta, Canada. Tom, were you going to?
I think Barry was, actually.
Oh, Barry is.
We don't have Jamie say something, no, Barry? You had short words.
Come on up here, Jamie.
What am I going to say? Mayor Grocott and members of the council, I'm proud to introduce for recognition Jamie Thiessen, who is a councillor, i.e. city council member of our sister city, Okotoks, Canada, which is in the province of Alberta. He's visiting here for a couple days, and will be performing a couple official functions tomorrow, and came tonight to observe the city council meeting and see how we do it. They have a similar size city. A lot of characteristics, demographics of their city is similar to ours. They have a similar form of government with a city council, city manager form of government. And so he is here tonight to observe at least part of the meeting tonight, and I appreciate the mayor taking time to recognize him. Jimmy?
Thank you very much, and it's always good to come and visit the sister city. We've done lots of exchanges and had an opportunity to get to know a lot of people and within both communities. And like I say, we look forward to hosting some of you again real soon. So thanks again for having me. I look forward to making a little short presentation tomorrow on one of our projects, which is seasonal solar thermal storage. And that's something we've been working on with our federal government and provincial government. And like I say, thanks again for having me. Thanks.
Can I ask you, do you have a junior hockey team?
We do, Yes, we do.
All right,
It just
I'll get
starts
the,
this year. We have a brand-new Centennial Arena, and they're going to be playing in that facility.
I want to buy a jersey from you, so I'll get information from you after.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Barry. Okay, we have reached item 8 on the agenda, which is public comment, which is a 10-minute duration for up to 5 speakers, 2 minutes apiece. If there's anything that is not on the posted agenda that anyone from the public would like to address the council on, now is the opportunity. Do you have any speaker cards? We have no speaker cards, and I see nobody coming forward, so we'll go on to item 9, which is approval of the consent calendar. The consent calendar is approved as one action unless any items are pulled for separate discussion, at which point they will go to under new business. And I did have a couple of items I wanted to pull, which is item 9G, 9I, and 9J. Any other items that anyone?
I had 9 ayes, so
Okay.
you got that?
Yes, you do.
Through the chair,
Yes.
From staff's perspective, I think it might be appropriate in that we've given you adjusted language for the ordinance on item F. I think it appropriate that we probably pull that one and discuss it as well.
Okay. Very good. So with that, I would entertain a motion for items A through E, item H, and item K through M.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call?
Councilmember Lewis.
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli.
Yes.
Councilmember David.
Yes.
Mayor Grocott.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. And that brings us to item 10, which is unfinished business. And item 10A is consideration of issuing a request for qualifications, or RFQ, for a feasibility study to analyze the cost-benefit implications of natural turf alternatives for Highlands Park, Lower Athletic Field. Barry Weiss, Parks and Recreation Director.
Mayor Grocott, members of the City Council. The recommendation before you is a reflection of direction given at previous council meetings in regards to athletic fields. Staff is recommending that an RFQ be released to conduct a feasibility study to analyze the cost-benefit implications of converting Highlands Park Lower Athletic Field from a sand-based natural turf field to a soil-based natural field. We are also recommending that negotiations begin with the San Carlos Elementary School District regarding improvements to the athletic fields at, in this order, Terra Linda Middle School, the upper and lower fields, Heather School, and Central Middle School. This, again, is reflective of direction given at the May 8th, 2006 City Council meeting. One note of transposition I did. In the recommendation, I listed the fields in the correct order that the council approved them on May 8th. That would be Highlands first, followed by TL second, Heather third, and Central fourth. Into the background, I transposed 2 and 3. So, but the recommendation, it has it in the correct order. Funding is available for this study as approved in the CIP plan budget for this year. Also, the dollar amount estimated what it would cost to do that is listed, $2.3 million for the Highlands conversion, as well as the dollar amounts available both July of 07 and in July of 2010, the dollars that would be available from Measure G. Because the recommendation from council was to renovate Highlands Park using Measure G funds as a primary source of funding. Feasibility study is an industry term that landscape architects use, and it really begins the process to start the construction and move down that road. It involves cost estimates, both long-term and short-term, as well as evaluating all aspects of the project. These aspects include engineering considerations, i.e. drainage, irrigation, etc., environmental considerations, although not in the EIR report, demand on ancillary facilities such as parking, roads, restrooms, an evaluation of current potential usage and contributing factors. Should the council approve releasing an RFQ, it will be done right away by staff, and once that selection process is complete, we would perform the study, we would hire a firm, perform the study, the firm would perform the study, and then staff would return to council with the results. As mentioned, this was the first priority for the City Council, and it is also the only one of the choices that's owned and operated by the city. That is why staff is also recommending beginning negotiations with the San Carlos Elementary School District for the other sites. Should we move forward and renovate sites at one or more of those school sites, it would involve a considerable amount of capital money to be expended. Because of that, staff recommends that we begin the negotiations with the school district for 4 different reasons. One, it is their property, and we need permission to do this. 2, use of Measure G funds should council want to use Measure G funds at one of those sites. As you know, there are some restrictions to the language involving Measure G. Also, council recommends discussion of a long-term lease with the effect of ownership in order for the city to amortize its expenditures, so that as changing priorities with the school district if they were to occur, it would not prevent the city from realizing the benefits of their expenditures. An example of this is Terra Linda School is currently building a new building, an additional building on their campus, and it is infringing on the lower athletic field now as we speak. And I know particularly girls softball is very concerned about that. So it's that kind of thing we'd like to have discussed ahead of time. And then, of course, these fields would need to be brokered and maintained. If the school district were to do that, then they would pay for all those costs. If the city were to do that, it would require additional resources for both staffing and supplies. And at this point, I would take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Barry. Any questions?
I do have a couple of questions, Barry, regarding the Highlands situation. You mentioned in the report a request for qualifications. Typically, we do that to determine who would want to issue or who would want to have issue a proposal for services. But it sounds as though you're talking about a RFQ as well as an RFP. In other words, you'll invite people to come in and make a decision as to who gets the contract.
Correct. It's a bit of a hybrid, if you think in those terms. We've done that before. We did it with our GWAIL for the design. What you do is you ask the firm to submit their qualifications, but in there you also describe the project. So the language that I used in this report as far as environmental considerations, engineering, cost, usage, et cetera, that language is in there. So they have to come forward not only with their qualifications, but how they would approach getting all that done for us. We would then select the most qualified firm. They'd go out and do the study, and then we'd bring that back.
As far as the content of the study, would that be sufficient to advise the council as to what the future course of action should be? When the study is complete, is that the intent of the study, is to make a recommendation as to what we should do with the field?
Yes. When the council made your decisions on May 8th of 2006, one of the comments made, too, by the mayor was the staff is to return with a report discussing details of what this looks like and the ramifications of these actions. So the staff is recommending that an outside firm be hired to come up with that study and provide that information.
And so it's been a few months since the last chapter closed on this issue. How's the field performing now? Is it in good shape? Is it usable? I haven't walked through it for some months. What is it?
The field's in as good a shape as it can be with the amount of usage. We have no issues with drainage or irrigation problems. The sand base holds up as well as the soil. Soil base gives you a little bit more play time if you're starting from zero. But we're almost double the amount of recommended time to keep it safe and playable. The Mahadi report, if you remember, in 2001 when council accepted that, gave us a recommendation of how much usage could be on that field. Because we have such good working relationships with all the user groups and the staff, we spend more resources on field maintenance than any city around. We've been able to up that a little bit and go beyond those recommendations. But even if you were to change it into a soil-based field, you're not going to get any more use. The field is in as good a shape as it can with the usage.
So in working through the task force recommendations, I had the recollection that the sand-based was a poor base, and that it didn't drain properly, and that's why we're getting some ponding, and why perhaps why the sod wasn't adhering as well as it should. It sounds as though that's probably not true in terms of your opinion and the staff's opinion, that the sand is a good base, the sod is a good sod, and if we go through this process, we may have that same recommendation, leave it alone, and just watch the use in order to get the maximum use out of it.
If I interpret right, and correct me if I don't, what you're asking for is
Go ahead.
You're asking for my professional opinion on that. Is that correct?
Right.
Staff's professional, this is a reflection of direction given by council at May 8th, 2006. Staff's professional recommendation would be, do not do that conversion, because you would spend that money and you would not get any increase in play. The advantage of sand is that it drains better, so maybe you get on the field a little bit quicker. The advantage of the soil base, is that it is stronger and you can get a little bit more usage on it. But we're so much beyond the usage level that's recommended, or even can keep the field, we couldn't afford to put any more usage on.
Okay. Pass the baton.
What we're trying to decide tonight is about whether or not to do the request for qualifications for Highlands, right? So the whole point of this is we'll get a cost-benefit analysis, project analysis, and then we can deal with some actual facts and figures of money and work and professional analysis of this, whether we go soil-based up there, or what would happen if we do that. Am I correct?
You would have an additional professional analysis.
Fantastic. So the question I have between alternatives 1 and 2 on this, which is to start with an analysis of Highlands and not proceed with an analysis of the other fields at this point in time. I certainly understand one half of those implications, which is once we've talked with the school board and once we've clarified some of our long-term leases or whatever the agreements are, then a feasibility study would happen when we have a lot more knowledge, which makes a lot of sense. On the downside of this, I wonder, Barry, is there significant dollar difference? In other words, if we did them all together and put together an immediate effort to talk with the school folks about the other fields, is there significant savings if we did more of them at one time? And then my second half of this question is, if we wait, how much longer are we delaying the process to do any field? Which, we haven't decided on what field to do yet because we haven't done all this analysis yet. So how much are we delaying the decision if a school site comes to the forefront, and maybe that's a likely site?
If you were to issue all 4 RFPs tonight, or 3, or however many you issue, there would be an economy of scale. How much of a savings we estimate $30,000 per site. How much of a savings would that be? I can't speak to that at this point, but intuition would tell you that there would be some economy of scale. The drawback to that is, if you do an RFQ, if you do a feasibility study for all sites, and then you don't get to it until years down the road, how valid is that study? If you knew you were going to go to do things right away, if we knew that we wanted all 4 and we had some funding in line, staff would be recommending that. Staff's not recommending that because, one, we don't even have funding for Highlands. Even if we use all of Measure G, we don't have enough money. As you know from the CIP budget, it's all on the unfunded list. And with the significant amount of dollars with the school sites, staff is recommending that we do, the recommendation to reflect council direction was to do just Highlands and then begin the negotiations. Those negotiations would then, we believe, give you better direction as where to spend the money and get the best return on your dollar.
So clarity on those school sites as soon as possible would help staff go forward with side-by-side feasibility studies based on...
Correct, because if you remember, one of the sites that you recommended, not even the school people had recommended. So they're going to deal with that. Plus, you've got the TL issue, where they're already cutting into the lower athletic field. And so staff believes that you need to get some agreement first.
Thank you. The difficulty I have is philosophical with these studies, I guess. I guess I'm still new enough to have some difficulty putting my arms around spending, even if it's in the budget, spending $30,000, and what is it going to tell us? It's going to tell us we want to use soil or sand, and it's going to tell us what's the best drainage and whatever, but it's not going to solve the basic issue of usage isn't going to go up a bit if we after we do the study, and there's no more usage that's going to come into play. They're not going to be able to tell us, well, if you do sand, you're going to get more usage, or if you do soil, you get more usage. As you mentioned, it's already over the line to some extent of what we're doing. So I just have difficulty. I don't want to flip a coin and say, well, let's take sand or let's take soil, but it's hard for me to get my arms around spending this money for these studies. I don't know what it's going to tell us in the long run to help us. Since we already voted to decide to put natural turf there, it's natural turf. I don't know. I guess I'm just having difficulty getting my arms around this. That's all. Not your recommendation. I think it's I appreciate where you're coming from professionally, and I do agree with the second part of your recommendation to immediately start talking to the San Carlos School District about this, because I think without that, we could find that they say we don't want to even deal with this. They could. I doubt they will, but. And I wouldn't want to necessarily spend money for additional studies before we even knew where they stood. So I'm not sure that was a question or just a statement that I came up with. I don't need a response from Mr. Weiss. Thank you. We had a discussion. We had a discussion on that today. I mean, it's just really hard for me. I'm just saying it's my level of difficulty to get my arms around all this. And I realize that we're not engineers. We're not. I mean, the expertise, I don't have it, and to make this call, but it's just really hard for me to philosophically get on side of it. And again, I didn't mean to cut you off there. If you have a comment on that, please say it.
Certainly you did not cut me off. That's no problem. Just two quick things. As you remember, the agronomic study that City Council hired Mark Mahady and Associates for in 2000 was a study that did analyze sand-based versus soil-based, and it's that recommendation, and he's one of the leading agronomists in the country that says you're not going to get any more. In fact, you already overuse it. The other thing about the RFQ is the work that would be done by this firm, whoever was selected, once you move forward with construction, this work has to be done anyway. It would just be part of that $2.3 million or whatever it is. It'd be part of that, because that starts the process. Certainly staff, with our analysis, we can tell you how much you're going to get on sand versus soil and usage, and because we have that skill, that expertise. We don't have it for evaluating the engineering and the environmental and the ancillary, so you would do that anyway. So the real question is, if you're going to move forward, you need this. If you're not going to move forward, then you don't need it.
Thank you. Thank you, Barry.
I have a few questions. Mentions in here a feasibility study would tell us, provide alternatives. So if, as Bob said, the decision was to go natural turf at Highlands, so I suppose the only two alternatives are soil or sand. Is that correct?
Well, the way the RFQ is written, we're directing them to focus on sand versus soil and tell us where that would be. Now, might they come back and say, if the only way to increase play is synthetic? Yeah, they might say that. But we're telling them the focus is sand, soil.
It mentions in here about an environmental impact report. It says that it is not an environmental impact report. If we're doing natural turf and we're essentially replacing the field with what's there with another natural turf field, is it true that an environmental impact report is not necessary?
My understanding is, yes, just as a little background, environmental considerations is standard language when you do an RFQ for a field. So it's not indigenous just to Highlands Park. It would be any field we have, any field any other cities has. It's just it's standard. They look at all that stuff. You know, where's the stormwater going to go, that kind of stuff. But my understanding is that if all you're doing is changing the surface, or even the soil underneath, but you're not changing the reason for that field and the usage, then the planning staff would give it a staff approval. I'm not a planner, and Liz would have to look at it, of course, before giving a statement, but that's my understanding. And I would certainly defer to Liz if she wanted to correct me.
Yes?
If I could, through the mayor, it really depends on the use and not necessarily the physical changes. So if you're increasing the use, the time, there are other factors associated with the field, such as lighting, then you might have an environmental review required. It might be a lesser than an environmental impact report. It could be a categorical exemption, but it really would depend on the details of the operation or the use rather than the physical changes.
Will this report then tell us whether that might occur, or at least give us, you take this option, it would, you take this other option, it won't?
It would give us the information we need to know when we go to planning to say what approval do we need.
Okay.
These firms don't know each city's particular processes, so my guess is they would probably not say you need to go to your planning director, you need to do it for EIR. They'd say here's the environmental impacts, and then we would take that and then go to planning, and planning would tell us.
Very good. Now, I suppose a field is just like anything else, like a roadway or the roof on your house or whatever. It has a certain lifespan, and when it gets to the end of that lifespan, you have to take it out and replace it. You can't do just maintenance like reseeding and so forth like that anymore. What's the life of Highlands? Where are we on that chart?
Actually, you need to break an athletic field down into two general components. One is the substructure, the draining, the irrigation. That has a specific lifespan, usually 30 years, sometimes as long as 50, but 30 is a good number. As far as the turf, since the turf is always growing and regenerating, and we overseed and fertilize and close your maintenance and stuff just to assist that process, you can keep grass going almost indefinitely if you don't overuse it and if you maintain it correctly.
So where are we on the substrate material?
That information I do not have. I do know for the turf, as long as we don't overuse it, we can keep it going. And Highlands was built in 1992, I believe. And so 30 years after that, what are we looking at, 2022?
Okay.
And that's if it's not more than 30 years.
Yeah. Okay, very good. And the last question I had, I just wanted to make sure, there are 4 items, as you said, for reasons why we would go to the San Carlos School District. But if we move ahead with Highlands, that would use up all the Measure G funds, and so then Measure G would not be an issue with the school sites because we wouldn't be using it for that anyways?
Correct.
Okay, very good. All right, those are my questions. We do have...
A follow-up, please, Matt?
Yes, okay.
Just listening to the dialogue, it seems to me we've got $30,000 to spend. I just wonder if this is the appropriate place for it. And if it isn't, perhaps we could assign it to Heather, where we have the committee's or the council's majority to put Heather into the possibility of artificial use and get that problem solved or get that problem on the table. I think when we finish Highlands, we're going to end up playing about the same amount of time we play now. If the sand is working well, we're probably not going to choose to replace it. If the turf is adhering properly, we're probably going to want to leave it. We're going to want to continue to maintain it. But nothing's really going to happen, and we've got $30,000 spent. So I would wonder whether it might be more appropriate to use that $30,000 to take care of the discussion for Heather. And if it didn't possibly add another 30 and work out Terra Linda as well. Just an idea for discussion.
In addition to that point, if I understand you correctly. Part of what we're saying is you can maintain a sand-based grass, natural turf, sand-based field if you control the usage. So do we really, if we're going to stay with natural turf, the real issue is can we find usage elsewhere in the city so we can maintain the usage at a level that we can maintain the grass? Do we really have to replace it if we can find additional participation on other fields? You know what I'm getting at? If we can maintain it, then why are we replacing it?
That, again, the report before you reflects City Council decisions May 8th. If staff were making an independent recommendation, it would be not to replace that field.
I guess I'm sort of just tagging on to Tom's point, which is if we could better judge if we can increase usage anywhere else in town, then we can make a better judgment as to whether or not this is money well spent.
And we can discuss that when we get to discussion. And if you need further professional help from Barry, we can do that at that time as well. Thank you, Barry. We do have some speaker cards on this item, and I'm just going to read these in order so that you can, I don't have that many, and if you would just remember where you are in line and come up. First is Bill Rosenberg, Kathleen Lynn, or is that Teenan? Kathleen, you know who you are. Okay, very good. Deborah Calkins, Richard Crone, and Heidi Crone. And if you could come up in that order. And if I butchered your name, you can straighten me out. Bill Rosenberg.
Hi, Bill Rosenberg, Heather Neighbors. We just brought a few of us along tonight to represent discussions we've had among our group and to remind you we want to see natural grass, not artificial turf. Heather, just in case you forgot. That was a joke, by the way. Tonight in particular, though, we have concerns about your process. At the meeting where this was last discussed, you directed staff to analyze grass versus turf at Heather. We don't see results from that analysis, yet we see the process moving forward to a later stage through the RFQ and plans for discussion with the school board. And we ask that the RFQ, not relating to Highlands, that's obviously a separate issue, but we ask that this RFQ and this discussion not be approved, and with the school board not be approved until a turf decision is made. We're concerned that a dynamic is continuing where rather than directly confront the issue, we're told that a decision is not actually being made, and yet artificial turf continues to stay alive, and that basically you're violating a basic rule of design, which says that make your decision before you start doing tactical implementation. You'll save yourself a lot of trouble later if you do that. We're also concerned that you're involving other parties in these later stages. Once again, it begins to look like sort of just a, pardon my French, but a stealthy way to push turf forward. And we want you to know that we're going to continue to energetically register our disagreement at each stage in this process where you push artificial turf forward at Heather, whether you do so transparently or obliquely, as appears to be the case tonight. And we remind you that each time an oblique maneuver such as this takes place, our trust in council diminishes, much to our dismay. We also continue to remind you that we could be cooperating with a well-executed planning process if we had one, and we continue to remind the sports participants that we could be helping you now to have far more playing slots than these makeshift alternatives will offer, even if they succeed, if only we could have cooperation and conflict. And I also want to respond to what I heard from Mr. Weiss. I'm more concerned than I was when I walked in here because I'm hearing things like, well, they might come back with a recommendation for artificial turf at Highlands. We went through this document with a fine-tooth comb, and when we read it, it looked like an RFQ. Now we're hearing that it's sort of a combination hybrid RFP, RFQ, but it doesn't say that on there. So in short, we hope you'll vote against the school board discussion and the RFQ for Heather at this point in your planning process. And we continue to hope that we can achieve a different relationship with the council and with the sports folks, a more positive one. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
I hope you all had a good summer, and we're back one more time. My name is Catherine Tynan. I live at 825 Somerset Court, and I'm here tonight representing Heather Neighbors. I would like again to restate our objection to any installations at Heather Elementary School other than natural turf. I am somewhat concerned about the prioritization of the fields changing over the evening here. Tierra Linda was to be next in consideration after Highlands. That said, we are also very concerned about the implicit validation of the city attorney's opinion that a long-term lease has the same effect as ownership. We have a different legal opinion to that. We feel that you're doing an end run around the Measure G language of owned and operated, and we question this legal basis. We would request that the negotiations, if they do occur, for the joint PA be curtailed to 10 to 15 years, not the 30 to 50 years that are mentioned in the staff report. Any longer leaves the community, I think, open to unrestricted improvement of school grounds by the city. As a point of order, even if it were legal, the long-term lease would not affect the amortization schedule that has been discussed, as any capital improvement can only be amortized, cannot be amortized longer than the warranty or the lifespan of the installation. So it seems crazy to be giving the city attorney the power to go and negotiate a joint powers agreement that will basically make commitments for 30 to 50 years on part of the city. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Deborah Calkins at 416 Portofino. And I'm just, basically, I'm a little bit concerned about what you plan on doing with the RFQ. Is it really going to result in an RFP, a request for purchase? It's a lot of money, as all of you have raised concerns in regards to, and it gives you kind of a study that seems to have already been done. I don't see where you're going to go with this in particular. Wanted to state once again that the Heather neighbors really object to any installation at Heather other than natural turf. And thank you.
Thank you. Richard Crone. Richard Crone, 148 Glasgow Lane, representing the Highlands neighbors. In regards to whether the council should approve a request for qualifications or a request for proposal, in the bidding process, it's very customary to go straight to a request for proposal, and this is in regards to Highlands Park, whether it should be sand or soil base. As you look at the options, I think it's probably four. The first is whether you should improve the current sand field, and will that provide any more playing time or quality improvements for the use of the field. The second would be to replace with new soil. The third is you could replace it with new sand, and the other is you could continue the maintenance as is. In matters of trying to select outside assistance, and I've been in consulting my entire career, you move to a request for qualification when you're trying to find the expertise. That's an interim move. If the scope is very clearly defined, and in this case I think it's very narrowly defined, it's either sand or soil, and you have sand today, you might consider simply going straight to a request for proposal and let the service providers present the business case and the benefits for your consideration given these four options. In doing this, you would save the money from doing a request for qualification, and in evaluating the RFP, the request for proposal responses, you would be determining the best solution, and the vendors or suppliers bidding would be incented to cover each of the four options and put together the best business case in order to win the business. In any case, all RFPs today are issued in a non-binding manner, and so it would still be up to the council's decision to simply maintain as you are today. So it would be my recommendation that you consider just simply issuing an RFP if you indeed need to increase your fact base
in order to understand what decision you should make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Heidi Liebenduth-Krohn, and I mostly want to just echo what Richard just said. It's unclear to me whether what you're evaluating here is choosing a firm to do this study, or whether ultimately that will be the firm that will implement the recommendations and do installation. It's hard for me, in reading this, to see is that the ultimate goal of this RFQ. And I think if that is the ultimate goal, I think it's important for the council to be upfront about that and to acknowledge that that really is the ultimate goal of the RFQ. In echoing Richard, if we are truly trying to evaluate, do we do new soil or new sand or just improve the sand-based field that we have? If we know that soil is more durable, sand has better drainage, but there are known flaws in the field in that it's not crowned properly for proper drainage to occur. It does seem that in getting competitive bids from various natural field companies, if you get, how many bids you feel are appropriate, that you would uncover a lot of the facts that you would want to consider in making that choice. And perhaps that $30,000 could be used in a down payment on a new park that would provide more playing space. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more speaker card from Cal Hunsinger. Actually, I have two.
Cal Hunsinger on Hewitt. I think most of my thoughts have been already expressed, but I wanted to add one further thought. I think today represents an interesting anniversary of 2.5 years of discussions around Heather Elementary School. I think it was exactly 2.5 years ago today, to the exact date that Barry first came up and addressed the neighborhood. And I think it's important to reinforce the fact that there's been a lot of discussions. I think the Heather Elementary neighborhood families have done an admirable job of representing the neighborhood in a thoughtful and well-reasoned fashion. And I think all of us have benefited from getting to know our neighbors really well. And I think we'll continue to meet and discuss and come before the council. Thank you.
Thank you. One more speaker.
Hi, I'm Raymond Morala. I think it's great that all the neighbors are coming out, and they're all representing their neighborhood. I think that we have to remember why this is an issue here in San Carlos. We have an unbelievable need for field space, and I think Councilman Lewis has kind of directed some attention to that. We have usage issues here, and maintaining status quo is really not going to cut it. The reason we're here again is because we have more demand for our fields than we have field time available. I'd like to say, though I don't know that I really have the license to say, that I represent the thousands of kids and thousands of parents that get so much joy and pleasure out of all the time that we spend playing on our athletic fields here in San Carlos, including those at Highlands Community Park and at Heather Field and the others. I think a lot of what I see here, I wonder if these people didn't play soccer or coach soccer. The first defensive tactic in soccer is to delay, and it seems like we're getting a lot of effort to delay any progress. Like Cal says, this thing's been going on for years. I think I've been involved in discussions about this for more than 4 years. I think it's time to go forward with something, and you guys kind of got handed a hot one from the last city council, I think, and it's kind of fallen in your lap, and I hate to see us continue to delay. And then as far as Mr. Rosenberg's comment that the neighbors can't join in with the sports groups, I don't think there's anything preventing us from working together to try to solve this problem right now. I think we are looking at other alternatives and things like that, and I think it'd be really important that the neighbors really recognize that and join us on that. And we're not, I think we are both trying to solve the same problem to some extent. Maybe we just have some different solutions right now in mind, and if we are cooperative, maybe we can get somewhere. But don't take the fact that we like to see all weather turf.
Ray, I'm sorry. You're addressing us, not the audience.
Oh, sorry. But I don't think that it's fair to say that because we have a different idea of what the optimal solutions are, that we can't work with the other people. Maybe try and persuade them. Kidding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And in that time, we had 2 more speaker cards. They just keep appearing. Allison Fox and Eloise Cullinan. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Allison Fox, and I'm a resident of Puerto Moreno Drive, directly below Heather. I have 2 children who will, in the near future, be attending Heather, and I must say I'm disappointed that I'm up here once again addressing the council. As many of my neighbors have indicated, there's a tremendous amount of frustration that I and my neighbors have about the lack of transparency with this process. The fact that, and it has been mentioned before, that there's been a change in the order of the interest in the fields has been brought up just in this meeting, that the issue of moving forward in negotiations with the school board was not listed on the agenda is just indicative of how the council seems to be moving forward with this issue, and I'm very, very frustrated. Like I think many of my neighbors and individuals throughout the city, we desire more playing space. I don't think many of us would disagree with that, but it's how we're approaching that. I think the money that is being discussed, and I think many of the council members are concerned about how to spend that money, and I'm glad to see that, could be better put to looking at new opportunities in new field space and not transforming the natural turf that particular elementary school students should have as opposed to synthetic materials would be much more desirous. And I am pleased to see that the mayor did bring up the issue about environmental reporting through the RFQ/RFP, because particularly if that is going to be extended to the schools, that's going to be a very, very important issue and one that could be potentially legally contentious and more expensive for the board to, for the council to address. So just in conclusion, I'm frustrated that I'm back here again, and would like to be spending my time elsewhere. And I really do hope that the council does not move forward with the RFQ at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Eloise Carlton. I live on Portofino Drive, directly above Heatherfield, and I agree with my neighbors and wanted to reiterate once again that we are opposed to anything except natural turf on Heatherfield. And the question of usage, if you can get just as much use from natural turf as you can from artificial turf, and if you can maintain natural turf, then why would you change to artificial turf? Mr. Rice has said that you're getting maximum use at Highlands from natural turf. So there's no way, if it can be shown that you're getting maximum use at Heather from natural turf, if you can maintain that natural turf, there's no reason to change to artificial turf. So I think we can work with the athletic groups as the representative expressed the desire to work with us, but we're not going to change our position.
Thank you. Barry, I don't want this to get into a discussion back and forth between public comment and staff, but some things were stated that I think you might want to make some clarification on, if you care to.
Just the one. I did not mean to indicate, certainly did not state that you get maximum use, you get as much use with natural turf as synthetic. My comment was that we've maxed out the use of the natural turf, and that you would not get any more by changing from a soil base to from a sand base to a soil base. You would get considerable amount of increased usage if you went with an all-weather turf.
And Barry, can you address the thing I was thinking about is something was said about the RFQ, RFP process, and even some terms were used that RFP being a request for purchase. Can you straighten some of that out?
Yes. An RFQ versus an RFP gives you more flexibility to choose the most qualified firm, and you do it within the parameters of which you want them to accomplish. then you hire them, and they go out and they do the analysis. So whether it's an RFQ or RFP, you still hire a firm, and you go out and they perform the work that we would bring back to council. RFQ gives you more flexibility in selecting the firm that you feel is best qualified.
And you mentioned to us, per a question by Tom Davids, that we're doing a bit of a hybrid here. Do you want to?
I said that because in response to Councilmember Davids, just to put it in a vernacular that maybe everybody could grasp. There are differences. An RFP begins your process a bit quicker. An RFQ gives you more flexibility. And in this case, staff is recommending an RFQ because it appears that there may be some, from the previous meetings, the direction given, that there's still some decisions to make. You wanted some analysis before finalizing that decision. And so we recommend an RFQ because while it is not quite as quick as an RFP, it gives the increased flexibility to select the firm that would be best qualified to perform that work.
Right. So to clarify, the item for tonight is whether or not we want to authorize an RFQ to determine which firm would be the best firm for us to ultimately do this feasibility study. It's just one step before we even award this work to a firm. It's just to get request for qualifications so we can figure out who's the best firm to do the feasibility study.
Correct. The way the process would work, if you were to approve issue an RFQ tonight, we would issue the RFQ. It would take weeks to get the word out and interviews and all that stuff. And then we would come back to council and we would recommend hiring of X firm, and we would explain in the report, the process we went through and why we selected that firm. Again, much like we did, or just like we did with the Arguello Park design. We did RFQ, we interviewed, we selected a firm, because we were going to need a firm either way to do the design, or in this case, talk about the field. And then we came back to council and said, would you approve this firm?
A question, Barry. In the recommendations, 1, 2, and, there's really 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, but especially I'm looking at 2, and then there was some question on this a bit earlier. Mr. Lewis was asking about all 4 sites. Could we, since we're going for qualifications right now, do we really need to make that decision per se, or could we pick a firm and still be a little up in the air on whether we're going to look at, do a feasibility study on just Highlands or all 4 sites?
I'm unclear on the question, if I could, please.
Okay, so the question is, because you're going out for an RFQ, which is qualifications, you're looking at a firm's qualifications, do you necessarily have to give them the full scope of the work? Does the scope of the work have to be defined absolutely, or can we look at the qualifications, you choose a firm, and then we say, okay, this is what we want you to do? Generally, conceptually, they know they're looking at field projects, whether they're looking at 1, 2, 3, or 4 projects. Is that material or not at this point?
It is material. We have found through experience that you need to define the scope of the project, because they respond then how best their firm can help you accomplish the scope of your project. Okay. So yes, you do need it.
Very good.
And the 4 you're talking about are on page 3, the 4 alternatives you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. No other questions? Discussion? And I suppose the place we might want to start, a couple of items. Bob is questioning whether we should be spending $30,000 on a feasibility study. Am I right on that? Yeah. And then I think one of the other questions that came up was just this issue of, do we look at Highlands only, or at least in the questioning process, what came up was looking at alternative 1 or alternative 2.
To what I was expecting, the step that we're taking tonight is to talk about an RFQ process. Mm-hmm. Nothing more than an RFQ process. And with Councilmember Grisilli's point, there is still a trigger for an RFP and an approval of those funds. We still have that We're not making that decision. The decision that's before us is whether or not we do a request for qualifications. So I just, and the other thing is, this is an incredibly, it's a complicated issue. Lots of different feelings on different sides, depending on these different alternatives. We have to sort of take each component as a component, I think, in order to work our way through this a step at a time. So I just want to encourage council, this is to talk about the issue before us, perhaps. And if we get too far afield, it's going to be difficult to navigate our way along.
Through the chair, Mr. Weiss, I'm sorry, I have one more question. I apologize. Just so I understand Qs and Ps, and these acronyms drive me crazy anyway, and this one's no different. If we vote for an RFQ, it's going to cost staff time. Is that correct? Some staff time.
Right. The difference between an RFQ and RFP, the staff time is really the same.
Okay. If we vote for an RFQ tonight, is it going to cost me is it going to cost, not me, Freudian slip, cost us $25,000, or is it going to wait till we pick the firm to do the work?
You would not expend any money until we have come back to you and you authorized acceptance of that firm.
Right.
At that point, you're authorizing them to do the work.
Understand. So that's my question. So at this point, if we authorize an RFQ, all we're doing is we're taking some staff time to prepare some documents, go out to the public, have some folks come back and say, or you pick who's qualified. Then you come back to us and say, now we've picked ABC firm to do this work. We think they're qualified to do it. Now, if you pull the trigger, it's going to cost you $25,000.
$30,000 incorrect.
$30,000. Okay, now I understand. So this is basically just anyway, it's not going to cost us any money to do this part of it. Okay. Thank you.
Well, it doesn't cost us money, but it costs us time.
Right.
And I guess that's where I'm hung up. I believe, after hearing from Barry, that the end result for Highlands is probably going to be to leave it alone. If, in fact, the sand is okay, the sod is okay, the sprinklers work, and we can maintain it, we get what we get. And we really can't play it much more than we're paying it. Barry would like to play it less in order to keep it in better shape. We did talk at one of the previous council meetings about changing the turf more often if we need to, and I think that's still on the table. But the bottom line is we're going to end up with a turf field, and that's what the council wants. Yes, natural turf.
On sand.
Pardon?
On
sand, the way it is. I'd like to move the process along. I suggested Heather because Heather is a big cloud out there that has to get resolved. But I certainly have no problem with staying with the original order and moving with some analysis of Terra Linda, and then come back to Heather in order of the listing, and then going to Central. But until we get the feasibility settled in terms of artificial turf and whether in fact we're going to proceed with it, nothing happens. The playtime doesn't grow anywhere, and the years go by. So my problem is if we go out for an RFQ, we're 2 months away before we see the results, and that's too much further down the road. And that's kind of where I'm hung up on it.
Well, my concerns are a little bit both of yours, which is if we're going to spend $30,000, we should really get something that we don't know. And it sounds to me like we're not going to learn too much more about Highlands than we know already. So in my way of thinking, that means we move on to the next field, which was our priority on May 8th, and that's Tierra Linda. And we'd learn a great deal if we did a feasibility study on Tierra Linda. My only question would be, when we go to the school, because they are talking about some construction on that site already with moving some buildings around and so forth, but they're certainly very aware. They've been keeping their finger on the pulse with what we're talking about, that we look at that site and spend the $30,000 on a feasibility study for Tierra Linda. And I think we can get a lot more bang for our buck out of that.
Well, so council made a decision before, and not to say that this is a big, unwieldy process. We have to work our way through it. Council before said we wanted to replace the natural turf at Highlands. But now it sounds like council's in discussions reconsidering that, perhaps, and Mr. Weiss can clarify, replacing the turf is not going to get us anywhere, which is what it seems like some of the consensus discussion is right now. So if we want to move on to the next step, it still would be to come back and come to an RFQ for the right firm to do a feasibility study. In as various states, we need to maybe have that targeted, whether that's Tierra Linda, if that's the next one up or not, which is sort of a new council decision, a new council direction. The thing I wonder is, are we prepared as a council, and Mr. Weiss, are you prepared at this point to say no new natural turf at Highlands, that we're not going to gain anything out of that? Because council before voted to put in natural turf there as our number one priority. Mr. Weiss is just doing what council asked him to do. So council would have to come off of their priority and reprioritize and come back to an RFQ for the firm who will do the feasibility study to do the field. So my interest is in us as a council, really giving clear direction that we can follow up on so we can get something done. And it feels like we're carts a little loose on the wagon here.
We didn't ask for the initial study for Highlands. Barry felt that was a way to go because that's a clear direction. And I think what we're hearing tonight is that, well, the council recommended soil base. I think we did so with perhaps, let's say, limited knowledge of what soil base versus sand base is all about. And I'm persuaded after I hear from him that our sand base works well, and there's really no need in his mind to change it. Now, someone may have a different opinion, but is it worth $1.3 million to do it? Probably not. And so it's not a compelling answer that we need right away because the field's there and the field can be played. The compelling need is to try to grow more fields and to get more space and more play time. We're not going to get it at Highlands, to speak of, but we will get it at Tierra Linda, Central, and possibly Heather, depending upon how that works out. So I would suggest we spend the money more productively and come up with an answer for one of the school sites, and let Highlands run itself for a while. We can always come back to it if we determine our discussion needs to go further.
I have a question for staff because there is a bit of confusion. The person who pointed out that in the agenda there's no mention of talking to the schools, or the school district. It's certainly mentioned in our four alternatives, well, at least 3 of them. And someone has, one of the public members commented on the duration of the agreement we would come to with the schools. So my question is, and then also when we look at the item title, it just talks about an RFQ for natural turf alternatives for Highlands Park. It doesn't say anything about talking to the school district. So where does that leave us in A, discussing that item, and B, does staff need some direction from council on how long we would like this agreement to stand for?
I'll give you my interpretation and then turn it over to the city attorney so that he can give you his. It is set up for action on Highland because we understood that was the direction that the city council had given us. And so we set this up for you to consider an RFQ that would be specific to Highland. Now, if you were going to tonight conclude that you wanted to do that, that's fine. The agenda's set up to do that. If you're to decide that you don't want to do that, that's fine too. If you decide that you want to send us off in another direction, you can give us some direction, and we'll go back and work on that direction and come back to you with an item specific to taking an action for another specific site. We wouldn't recommend that you take a specific action or try to take a specific action tonight to authorize an RFQ on a project or a site that's not listed on the title or on the agenda.
So we would be doing item 4, provide staff with alternative direction, and then you would bring us back with another action.
And we would come back as that was agendized. Now, with regard to the school district, we just think it's prudent action to start talking with the school district. And frankly, I don't know that it's absolutely necessary. We thought it was good to include it within the report so that the council could give us some idea as to whether or not we were pursuing this logically and consistent with the council thoughts on it. But we have 2+2 meetings with on a regular basis with the school district, and we think it's prudent to start those discussions with them with respect to agreements for the use of their facilities, whether or not it's turf, artificial surface, or some other alternative. I mean, if we're going to be spending millions of dollars and investing in these fields, we think it's prudent to have productive discussions with the school district sooner rather than later so that we know what kind of access to those fields we might expect.
No doubt. And I agree with you. I would also agree with the public member who pointed out that just for transparency's sake, and, a lot of people review the agenda and don't go into the detail of the material, especially until the city clerk gets all that stuff on the website. So it would be easy to think that all we were talking about was just the RFQ on Highlands and no discussion of anything else. And so in the agenda, if it had said something about this other, about talking to the school district, understanding, as you say, Mr. City Manager, that we have those meetings all the time, and they're 2+2, meaning 2 council members, 2 school board members. They are not publicly noticed because they're ad hoc meetings. I understand all that, but
I accept full responsibility for that. We had discussion at the staff level as to whether or not the title ought to be longer to include a more descriptive discussion of what was in the staff report, and I chose to keep it more focused and more on topic in terms of what the actual action was that we were asking for from the city council.
Well, thanks for your comments. Appreciate that. Okay, further discussion up here. I guess I would be looking at, I don't often do this as the mayor making a motion, but I will make a motion that we, item 4, provide staff with an alternative direction, which would be to look at an RFQ process for Tierra Linda, and that would be my motion.
Through the chair, would you add on that we would discuss with the San Carlos Elementary School District regarding the other deals?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I would.
Through the chair, I just, what we probably need to do is have a discussion with the school district and see if Tierra Linda is still on the table. In other words, I'm not sure if we can do an RFQ for Tierra Linda unless we know that that's in play. And what we're sort of saying is we don't know exactly what's in play. We need to put the priority of talking to the school board up front, and that, to me, that's the alternative direction, is let's get that moving.
Let me ask a question then of the city manager. We have a 2+2 meeting scheduled sometime in early September, I believe.
That's correct.
What's the date of that?
We didn't set a date, but it is conceptually in September, yes.
And the next, if we gave direction, as I suggested in my motion, then the next time that we would see it at the council meeting would be late September or early October. In other words, there would be an opportunity to have the 2+2 meeting address the school board on Tierra Linda and see where we are with that?
Correct.
Correct, okay. Do you see where I'm going?
Yeah, I see where you're going, maybe as an order, a priority order, start with the school district, but it seems like we want to talk about all the fields. So maybe that would, to start with the school, I just wouldn't want to confine it to one field necessarily, right? We want to talk about...
Oh, yeah, it would be open to all the fields, but as far as the RFQ goes, we might be giving direction to look at Tierra Linda.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd put that off, Mayor, until we have the consensus of the school board and their basic permission to proceed.
Okay. We're discussing my motion without a second, but I guess there is no second, and there's going to be a different direction here. So then the direction, if I understand it, well, Bob, you want to?
No, I just, first of all, Mr. Weiss and his staff obviously were at the meeting in May and listened to what we said, and they came back to us with what we said. We said X, and they came back to us. And tonight we're changing what we said to the fact of considering the information that we've been given tonight, as Vice Mayor David said, I have, again, difficulty putting my arms around what kind of bang for your buck you're going to get for $30,000 to tell you whether, as long as we're all, and we did vote on that we wanted natural turf at Highlands. To go to the other fields and do any RFQ, I think, is, as Councilman Lewis said, is preliminary to the fact that the San Carlos Elementary School District may say, Tierra Linda is out of play because we're building a new building there. And so my motion would be, and I'll make it here, that we instruct the 2+2 committee to talk to the San Carlos Elementary School District regarding improvements or changes in the athletic fields at Tierra Linda, Heather, and Central Middle School, and that we postpone, or I'm not even going to speak to the RFQ, not even to issue one, until we have that discussion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. So I understand the motion, and so everybody understands the motion by Councilmember Grisilli. It is to begin negotiations with the San Carlos...
discussion, I would say, more than negotiation.
Okay. To begin...
discussions, negotiations. I don't know what the word is, but certainly negotiations, something. We've got to work with them. I don't know whether that's the term through the city attorney, whether it's negotiate, discuss... begin discussion.
It sounds like you want to initiate discussions at this point in time and then bring back this general item about the school district-owned fields for a future agenda.
Okay, so I'll state it this way. To initiate discussions with the San Carlos Elementary School District regarding improvements to athletic fields at Tierra Linda Middle School, Upper and Lower, Heather School, and Central Middle School, and to not at this point issue an RFQ.
That would be my motion.
I already had a second.
And the second was by Councilmember Lewis. So discussion on the item. Roll call.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Okay, thank you for moving that along, Councilmember Grisilli. Everybody really, but he made the motion that won the day. Okay, that brings us to item 10B, which is to adopt ordinance number 1374, amending the San Carlos Municipal Code, Chapter 18, 140, parking within the city of San Carlos. And before Liz gives her report on this, I would just like to comment the reason this is a second reading of the ordinance, which is typical for adoption. Usually it would show up on the consent calendar, except that I voted against it. I had some concerns with a few items. I have talked to staff about those items. They only have to do with the parts that relate to residential and garage sizes and so forth. I talked to the city manager about that, and with council's, without going into the details unless you would like me to, with council's consensus, what I would like to do or offer is that we go ahead and pass this ordinance tonight, and then I will meet with Planning Director Cullinan on the concerns I have, and then we would see this ordinance come back to us, possibly with any changes per the discussions I have with Planning Director Cullinan.
So this is the same as the one we saw before and discussed before?
Yeah, and my point, Vice Mayor Davids, is that to not, there are things in here, changes that we made, and to not hold up the implementation of those changes, to go ahead and pass the ordinance tonight, and then I will address the concerns that I have having to do with residential projects, again, which were not part of these changes, but at a later time.
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 1374. Which says, yikes.
I'll read it. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos amending parking regulations within the City of San Carlos.
Second.
There's been a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. And I take it council is fine with me meeting with staff and discussing those items?
Sure, bring that back. Actually, I appreciate you separating those two items.
Very well. Okay. The next item is 10C, which is a report on recommendations of the Economic Development Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission on the request for a moratorium on coffee shops within the 600, 700, and 800 blocks of Laurel Street. Liz Cullinan, Planning.
Good evening, Mayor Grocott, members of the council, members of the San Carlos community. As you will recall, the council considered a petition requesting a prohibition on future coffee shops in the downtown area and considered that petition at their May 22nd, 2006 council meeting. The council at that meeting specifically directed staff to bring 3 specific issues to the Economic Development Advisory Commission and to the Planning Commission. This, again, relates to the request for a prohibition on coffee shops in the downtown area. First, the council directed the commissions to study the issue of limiting coffee shops within a close proximity of each other. Secondly, to explore providing incentives to small businesses. And third, the issue of requiring national and regional retailers to go through a review process, perhaps by the Planning Commission and the City Council, as opposed to local retailers. Both the EDAC and the Planning Commission have reviewed those 3 issues over the summer and had very similar recommendations and comments on the 3 topics. They specifically voted not to recommend a limit on coffee shops within the downtown, to consider small business incentives in conjunction with the ongoing economic development plan, and finally not to establish an additional review process for national and regional retailers. Essentially, the commissions made their recommendation based on an interest in allowing the shoppers in San Carlos to vote with their dollars and really to let the free market reign in terms of the types of businesses in the community. Staff is recommending that you receive the recommendations of the 2 commissions and provide us with any direction you feel appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Any questions?
One question is in terms of the economic development plan currently underway. Are business incentives a part of that discussion?
Yes, they are intended to be part of that analysis and plan.
Okay. And I haven't read the Downtown Citizens Advisory Committee plan for some time, and I don't recall what it said about the more national type chains, such as Starbucks. It had a comment regarding them, and as I read this, apparently it had to do with that's kind of the first wave, as they call it. Can you explain that process and what it means in terms of the overall recommendations of the committee?
Yes, through the Retail Task Force report, which this particular issue you're talking about came up through a series of economic development experts and also through the citizens themselves, as appointed by the City Council, talked about coffee shops, and they used Starbucks, they used Blockbuster Video as an example of that first wave of success for a downtown. The point of that really was that San Carlos's downtown is currently not in a position to be sort of hand-selecting the specific types of tenants that would come into the downtown. That's something that you might do at a different stage in a downtown's development and success. So they use that as a way to attract and to stabilize the downtown area, attract people to the downtown.
Oh, thank you.
Brad, you had some questions?
No, actually along Tom's line, the only clarification was, has EDAC or have you done any consideration in the past year or two discussing incentives for small business owners? Or is this, if we combine this process, it'll be kind of a new, fresh review? I guess I want to make sure that, I want to do it, I think it's important to do it, but I want to be sure that it's not something that's just been done or we're asking for a rehash of something that's been done.
It has been discussed in the past, but not at the level that's expected at the economic development plan. This is sort of a high-level sort of area of expertise review that we would expect.
Great, thank you.
Liz, I have a number of questions. I'm going to try my best to go through these. I'm not sure how to get through them, actually, because I'll just state them. The first thing that that I wanted to ask was, even in the title report tonight, it talks about recommendations on the moratorium on coffee shops, and number one, I don't know that we were talking about a moratorium. We were talking about, should we limit the location of them, similar to what we did with hair salons and banks, where we said, yeah, you can have them, but there has to be a certain distance between them. That, to me, is not a moratorium. It's a limitation, if you will. And secondly, we asked that there be a consideration that national and regional retail, those applications as a point of process, or as part of the process, would go to Planning Commission, and then after Planning Commission, they would come to the City Council. So I'm wondering how well that was understood or vetted in these both venues. And in fact, when I look at the minutes from the Planning Commission, which is included here, there says the same thing, consideration of the moratorium on coffee shops, including the proposed Starbucks on the 800 block of Laurel Street. It doesn't say anything about national and regional retail, and in fact, when I read the minutes, it doesn't look like they even talked about it.
The title represents the specific request of the petition, so we're being sensitive to the request that you really need to respond to. And the rest of the report, having been in attendance at both the commission meetings, both commissions very specifically through both their staff report and their discussions discuss those three areas. So the EDAC actually broke their motions down by those three topics. So these three topics we saw as a way of analyzing whether or not you wanted to have some type of moratorium to coffee shops in the downtown. And again, that title reflects specifically what the petition says, and so we thought we'd bring the request to a close to basically to have you respond specifically to that request and not leave it open.
Okay. The other question I had, I don't know how to put this in the form of a question really, but and I see a different attorney here than wrote this memo. But when I read through the memo, I thought, well, I can understand why EDAC and Planning Commission came up with the final decision that they did, because the memo kind of scares you into not doing anything for fear that you might get sued or something of that nature. And so I'm kind of curious what the city attorney's office was, what their understanding of this issue was, what it was that we were asking for.
My recollection from the May 22nd council meeting is that the city attorney was to provide an advice or an opinion letter essentially on somehow limiting or prohibiting chains in the downtown area. That was an issue that was addressed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right, they did, and okay.
So I think that there obviously isn't a lot of precedence for this type of prohibition, so it's difficult to point to other jurisdictions in the area that may have had the experience and either had it upheld or not, or challenged.
One of the things I didn't mention in here was hair salons and beauty salons and that sort of thing, haircutting establishments, and we did that in our town, but it doesn't mention whether that was ever challenged or how we got away with it. Or
We don't prohibit them. We again have that distance requirement.
Which isn't that what Mr. Seamers was asking for?
He's asking for a moratorium.
What if we asked for it? What if the council, what if we decided tonight, you know what, we don't want a moratorium, but what we would like is some analysis of, number one, how often do we have coffee shops or places that just retail in coffee? You know, Vic's is not a coffee shop, but they retail in coffee drinks. If we wanted to look at how frequently do those things occur now, and do we want to have some kind of distance between them along the street so that we don't get overrun with coffee shops?
So That's issue number one that you had brought up at the May 22nd council meeting, and you would provide direction to staff if the council were inclined to do this, that you would want us to look at an ordinance. The city attorney's memo is really not talking about that kind of distance requirement or additional review process. So if you wanted to have a use permit required or a distance requirement, that's something that the staff could just simply do through an ordinance amendment.
Do you feel like EDAC and Planning Commission did address that already?
Yes.
And they said no?
That's correct.
Okay. And then on the review process, let me ask a question I've been thinking about, and that is when a project does come to the Planning Commission, like, say, let's just use the Starbucks project, for example, it would come under what conditions? What's Planning Commission being asked to look at? Parking and...
Currently?
Yeah.
Currently, an existing retailer, and Starbucks would be considered a retailer, would just be a permitted use. If they didn't, and they could continue non-conforming parking, but if they had a vacancy or they had some kind of deficiency, they needed an exception, they might come to the Planning Commission.
Did they come to the Planning Commission?
No, use permit's not required currently.
Okay. So they did not come to the Planning Commission?
No.
Okay. All right. That's all right. Because, and the reason I asked that question is because my concept of what we were asking for was simply that when a project that is, the applicant is a national retail or regional retail, when they do have to go through the process of going to the Planning Commission, then just as a matter of course, they would also, without appeal or anything, they would just simply also come to the council. Because I felt like part of what we were suffering from, in the case of Starbucks, it would be no different, but part of what we were suffering from is people asking us about it and not knowing a thing about it because it didn't come to us. We didn't make a decision on it. I'm not asking to make a decision on it, except, again, my thought was if it goes to the Planning Commission and it's a regional retail or a national retail applicant, automatically it would come to the City Council as well.
Right. We understood that request for study. So I think that we understood that very clearly the way you're describing it now, and I believe that the commissions also did as well.
Okay.
So all three of those areas made sense, complete sense, and I think they were portrayed accurately, so it's just a matter of whether or not those areas you want to pursue at this point.
Okay, and then the last question I have, and I appreciate my council members' patience since I'm asking most of the questions here. There is a thing that says, although the specific fiscal implications, I'm on the cover page under fiscal implications, it says the fiscal implications have not been determined. High-quality value coffee shops can contribute to a downtown shopping experience and strengthen future retail opportunities. So have we, while that can be true and while the market can sort of drive that, do we recognize some kind of saturation level, or are we concerned about that at all?
That's really a policy call. The experts that we had involved in the Downtown Retail Task Force didn't feel that that was a threat to the downtown at this point. They thought actually these types of uses could be a strength to the downtown. If and when the downtown is at a different stage and you want to start being more selective of the types of tenants, you could perhaps explore that maybe with the West Side Specific Plan update, for example. So that's what the experts involved in the report that we've attached have essentially said, that there may be a time and place for having additional review processes, but it is not the time and place in San Carlos, was their opinion.
Okay. All right. Now, do we want to, counsel, I would ask the question of us. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
There are some bullet point recommendations. One of them is about this incentive program. There was something in our packet that looked like it was kind of trying to address incentive programs, but it didn't make sense to me, this California incentives thing. But is there some direction that we want to give with regard to that?
Well, I think it's underway. The economic development program is being developed, and as Liz said, this will be a part of that discussion and presumably some recommendations. So I think that's in process.
I agree with that. I mean, what I see, conceptually, what it feels like we talk about a lot in San Carlos is the village feel versus there are a lot of modern amenities and some of the chains that can bring in certain kinds of businesses that are also great for the community and so forth. It always seems like we're talking about how do we strike that balance between maintaining the village feel and not letting national chains overrun San Carlos, or, it seems like we're always in that balance. So for me, that's part of what we're hoping is like the discussion on economic incentives for small business owners is, I think that, perhaps there is an economic disadvantage to being a small business owner in this day and age, and that's and so perhaps we look at the incentives. So how can we help restore that balance so we can keep the mix that everybody seems to sort of like as we sort of grow and try to make sure that we're providing the businesses that the citizens of San Carlos like. Neither one is good or bad. I don't think. I think a good balance for the town is what we seek, and I think that that's good. But believe me, when people talk about the free market, Starbucks would be failing if people didn't want to go there. So it's just a matter of how can we be wardens of culturally what we all respond to in San Carlos. So it's my opinion that we may need to look into these economic incentives for small business owners so we can help maintain that balance. But again, in my family, we've always said beggars can't be choosers. And we are in a position where right now I would be afraid that we discourage businesses from looking at San Carlos if we start to put too many things under review when we still need to step out a little bit and make sure that we're encouraging business to take a hard look at San Carlos, because I think we're a great town to locate. So.
Liz, is it fair to say, not to question Vice Mayor Davids, but the economic study can look at this, and I'm not sure it was part of the original RF, whatever it would be. So is it costing us any more money?
Well, actually, there's two different things going on. There's the market study that ERA is doing, and that's opportunities for different types of businesses coming in. And then there's the Economic Development Action Plan, which is being done by RSG, Mr. Spivacek, that you met at a recent meeting. It's the latter of the two studies that would do what you're getting at, Mayor Grocott, and that is very much in the scope contained in the price you heard, no additional cost.
Very good. Okay. Thank you.
Through the chair, do we need a motion to receive this recommendation, or?
Yes.
That's our recommendation.
Okay, well, I make a motion that we receive the recommendation of the EDAC and Planning Commission on this item.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. And again, I thank the council for their patience in letting me ask a number of questions, but I wanted to get all that cleared up. That brings us then to item 10D, I believe, which is consideration of the conceptual pedestrian plan. Parviz Mukhtar.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as part of the strategic plan that was adopted by City Council back in February under improved infrastructure, there was one item, item number 5, that Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee working with the Public Works and Traffic Transportation Commission prepare a pedestrian safety plan. Of course, that was presented to the committee, and we have to realize this is really a major task for some volunteers who have their own lives and jobs to do something like this. This is really a major project. But PPAC members held a workshop in April and decided how they want to tackle this and come up with some ideas. So sort of was decided that really the pedestrian volumes are around the schools and parks. And decided to divide the city based on these locations, and every members volunteered to, for example, survey the areas that they were volunteered or assigned to do. And the result was every member came back with some suggestion recommendations in the vicinity of the schools and parks, and we took all the suggestions and recommendations and put on the plan that is in front of you. Basically, really they've done a good job as far as the ramps are concerned, sidewalk ramps, wheelchair ramps, if you will. Identified the locations where there should be some ramps, and they have put them in the priority order. And they have recommended some sidewalk improvements. So the staff recommendation is that you receive the plan and refer the sidewalks to be considered and the circulation element of a general plan update, which is going to be done whenever next year, I think. And as far as the ramps, because there is no funding in this fiscal year budget for preparation of next year's budget, depending on availability of funds, we may come back with some alternatives. Again, take these ramps and put them in perhaps 2 or 3, 4-year program as funding becomes available to do the ramps. And some members of the BPAC are present. They may have some other comments, not as the BPAC, but as individual members or residents. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, questions?
The question part is regarding the safe routes to schools. Is that program ongoing, or is that sort of on hold as well?
Either way, it's on hold, and I think Chairperson Pyle is here. She can tell you about what happened to the program.
Okay, all right.
So, Parviz, I'm a little concerned. The one concern I have is I think the pedestrian safety plan is incredibly important. So I have two issues. One is in the way that you were just presenting it, is like depending on availability that we might do it is a real weak way for us to approach this, I think, as a city. In other words, what I prefer for us to do, if it's too broad in scope, to put a plan together and say, well, let's define what scope we can estimate we can get done in each year so we can tell everybody what to expect, what we can and can't come through on, and prioritize accordingly. So I'd like to see that, and I wonder whether or not that could be a part of it. And the second part, sort of a question and also a comment, is there's a couple of the other elements that you listed that we haven't reflected in the plan yet that I really want to see us get to. Reducing car speed by installing speed humps or bulb outs for narrow streets, installing pedestrian signs, implement the South Rates School program, and striping crosswalks that seem to me may not be as capitally expensive, but would need to get on some sort of a comprehensive plan. We need to sort of each year, I mean, I can appreciate the fact that it takes a lot, it's a big plan, there's way too much to do in any given year, but rather than approach it with, right, I mean, there's got to be, and just looking at the map, I didn't count them, but there's got to be, maybe 40 or 50 handicap ramps and so forth, which we need to try to get to a lot of this stuff. But I guess what I'm saying is I'd like to see us be a little more careful how much we piecemeal this, put this together a little bit more comprehensively and say, here's what we can do next year, here's what we're going to do the year after that, with it like we do anything else, which is to define the scope of the project and start to say, here's the plan, and let's and tell everybody what our intentions are and basically put our money where our mouth is on pedestrian safety as well. So how soon can we get to these other items, given the fact that it's taken the better part of the year to get to these items? And I don't take anything away from the volunteer commissions. I mean, it's a heck of a lot of work, and I completely appreciate the work that's going into this. I just really want to see us support these guys, because I think they're putting a lot of time into it, and really put the plan together and go get it.
As far as traffic calming, first of all, there's a policy. The city has a policy that was recommended by Traffic Transportation Commission, and we worked on it for months and months, and was adopted by City Council. If you are directing the staff to revisit that, it takes another year. Because, for example, speed hump policy, we surveyed all of California cities and put some criteria together that makes sense. You don't want to install the speed humps on every street or every street that residents request, because emergency vehicles have to go through the same streets. They create a lot of other problems. So even through all of that, and adopted the policy, City Council adopted the policy. If City Council directs the staff that they want
to review the policy, take it back to Traffic Transportation Commission, we'll be happy to do that. Same thing with all other traffic calming.
I completely understand that. I'm not looking for you to respond to each one of these. I guess what I'm saying is, if we have a plan that in the next 2 years says we have an existing policy on speed humps, we're not going to react to that till the next 2 years, we know as a council that, boy, if we do want to do something there, we need to change that policy. In other words, but until we get a more comprehensive approach, we don't even know to respond to that. And I was just actually trying to go to the report, which it says it's committee member recommendations, but they're not in the plan. So all I'm suggesting is can we comprehensively say either we are or we're not going to do something, or the plan is not to do anything over the next couple of years, and then we can also respond to that as a council. Does that make sense?
Again, during part of it, during preparation of the next year's budget, for example, the ramps we're going to put in, and we'll review the other policies, and we can put it together. I think as part of the perhaps next year's work program.
Okay, and I guess it's just as important to identify what we might do as what is not being planned to do, or when we might do things that aren't currently planned on the next year.
Okay. Bob? Tom? You asked your questions already? I had a couple of questions just in terms of looking at the map with the dots on it and the ramps. Is there a plan of attack on how to address these? In other words, like, for instance, I'm noticing on McHugh near the train depot, that would seem like a key project that might be high on the priority list because of the commuters and the train and so forth, or some of these intersections where there's 3 black dots, meaning there's 3 existing ramps, and 1 red dot, meaning there's a ramp that's not there. That's to complete that intersection would seem like a high priority.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. When I said during the budget process, we're going to put these in a priority, those are exactly the locations. We'll say first year, whatever money that we have, we should do this first year and then prioritize the next year. Exactly. But you're absolutely right. When there are 3 and 1 missing, that should be done.
Yeah. Okay. And then I also wanted to give an opportunity. I noticed there's a number of members of the group that put this together, and I want to, before any of those members come up and speak, if they wish to, along with Brad and on behalf of the whole council, this is you guys are going in the extra mile, because when we put advisory committees together, generally rely on staff to do work, and they just go to meetings and make decisions and make recommendations. They don't go out and survey intersections and so forth. And so I appreciate you guys going the extra mile and really putting some oomph behind your work here by putting in some sweat equity, if you will. So thank you very much on behalf of the council for that. And if you would like to come to the podium and add anything, any comments, please do so now.
Mr. Mayor, as Margaret's coming up, I just want to let you know that we didn't have the equipment for her PowerPoint, but I did print it out, and I gave it to the council, so I apologize for no equipment, but I did get your handout. Great.
One of the members and I got together and talked yesterday. By the way, I'm Margaret Pye. I'm the chairperson of the committee. And we were trying to summarize what we thought about pedestrian safety. And we feel very strongly that ramps are great, but that doesn't give us pedestrian safety. So we think it's a much broader topic than that. For example, I certainly recognize unsafe pedestrian conditions when I see them. If there's lots of collisions between vehicles and pedestrians, that constitutes the lack of pedestrian safety. So we're looking for the opposite of that. Unfortunately, it's not that simple, because even if there are no pedestrian collisions with vehicles, that doesn't mean that we have perfect pedestrian safety. It might mean that people perceive the streets as being so unsafe that they don't even want to get in there, get out of their homes and walk to the grocery store, which is not what we want San Carlos to be, a place where people are so afraid of the streets that they won't walk anywhere. And that goes for everybody, shoppers and kids going to school. And the second item on the PowerPoint thing that you have, the goals that we came up with were to reduce pedestrian injuries, of course, and also to increase walking trips and transit use while achieving reductions in motorized trips. So we're hoping to see fewer people in cars. That's kind of our goal. And we came up with a kind of a four-pronged idea on how to accomplish that. And the first one is to get everybody on board. We were talking about Safe Routes to Schools. You, City Council, approved some money for us to put together a workshop to encourage children to walk to school. And we would love to have that happen. We even identified a group that could provide the presentation. But we haven't been able to get, we were kind of hoping that we would have some schools step up and say, yes, we want to have this workshop at our school, and we want to get our kids walking to school. But we haven't had that kind of response. So I guess we need the leadership of the City Council to get all the city organizations on board to help us out with this. And pedestrian safety education is important also. Item 3, managing engineering, planning, and design, that's kind of Parvise's piece of the puzzle. And law enforcement of pedestrian safety rules is the fourth one. On getting everyone on board, as I said, the schools that's crucial. We need some help with the school piece. But also just about every other city organization. The Chamber of Commerce could help us, and if there's neighborhood groups, like neighborhood safety groups, the block parents, don't we still have those? We're not sure about that. And on the pedestrian safety education program, that was what I was talking about with the Safe Routes to Schools and trying to get the schools to really help us out with this. That would really make all the difference. And on the third strategy, managing engineering, planning, and design, that traffic calming policy that the city passed a little while ago seems, and the one I'm referring to is the one where the city said that they would not consider paying for any traffic calming. That's a basic policy, and I know it was passed not that long ago, but we would like you to revisit that, because the precluding of the city paying for it is just probably going to make it not happen. So that doesn't seem like it's very pedestrian safety to refuse to pay for any traffic calming. And the fourth strategy, emphasizing law enforcement of pedestrian safety rules, I was thinking about the decoy programs that some cities have been very successful with, where they have kind of decoy people crossing the streets with a city police officer nearby. And if any unsafe motorists are seen driving down the street, the police officer can either just issue a warning or actually a ticket. I think those have been very successful. And the other recommendations that we have are to reduce vehicle speeds in any way we can, even if that means lowering speed limits. Research has shown that when there are collisions between pedestrians and vehicles, if the vehicles are going slower, the injuries are less. So that is one way to increase pedestrian safety. We would also like obstructions to be removed, like boxes and telephone poles that are in the middle of sidewalks, and encouraging residents to walk to schools and businesses. A lot of us choose to walk places as our preferred way of getting around, and we don't want to be seen as oddities or objects of pity because we don't have a car. We would like the city of good living to not be the city where the motor vehicle is the king. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. All right, we've been asked to receive this report, and our options are listed on the back page to receive it or provide staff with an alternative direction. And I actually wrote something, I suppose, which would be in line with number 2, an alternative direction. I wrote it out as number 3. I think it relates to what Brad was talking about, and that is perhaps that we incorporate this report into our strategic plan objectives under, if I go to our strategic plan, and we had, it would address 2 areas, the update on the general plan and the East Side specific plan as part of the circulation element. Is that correct, Liz?
Yes, and in fact, some of the issues that Ms. Pai noted are already in the circulation element, and the BPAC had a good part in creating that language. So I think those have gone, basically for new development, those types of policies would become applicable with the new general plan update.
Okay, and then there was a section in here where Parviz's name showed up a lot. Where was that? Let's see. Maintain this. It's under maintain and enhance public safety. And if there's a way that we could incorporate this into this matrix, and perhaps we could even identify, I think to go to Brad's point, even if we could identify some of these intersections with the ramps and say in 6 months or in a year, certainly within 3 years, which I think this is, we did look at with this strategic planning, a 3-year horizon, that we could identify some of these projects, have them on a list, so we can follow them as a council and see some progress, which I think is what Councilmember Lewis was looking for. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to see us establish clear objectives, which could be done in a form like that under public safety, and then we can just track what we can and can't do toward those objectives on a yearly basis. If we can't do it all in 1 year, which certainly we can't. I'm just looking for us to work comprehensively and then send a strong message for the things that we are doing, and we can also account for things that we can't yet do. I just want to make sure we're really not vague about that, really clear about that. So that would be I'd support the idea of coming up with clear objectives for a pedestrian safety plan as part of the public safety strategic plan.
Okay. Is this something that we need to take action on, or is that direction enough, or what is it that we need here?
The strategic plan tries to get to a point of saying that, that so-and-so will do such and such by such and such a date.
Right.
And so if there's some portion of the plan that you would like us to prioritize and create an objective or consideration to amend the plan, then one of 2 things. We could either do that tonight because we have the strategic plan on the agenda for consideration. So we could try to formulate a specific objective tonight, or you could ask staff to try to formulate an objective in one of the categories. Maybe it is traffic calming, or maybe it's the ramps. But you tell us, I guess, as to what portion of it you'd like us to create an objective, and we could, at the staff level, formulate something and bring it back for future consideration. So one of 2 things: either we try to create the detailed objective tonight, or if you can give us some ideas to what you'd like us to, from a policy standpoint, prioritize and hone in on, we'll take it back and bring it back for further consideration at a later date.
Okay, Council, why don't we discuss what Mark is suggesting momentarily, and perhaps we can give direction.
I guess it's hard to weigh the pluses and minuses on the recommendations without being a part of the committee discussion. So I'm wondering whether we should ask the committee to come back with an action plan that we can then make a part of our activity and make a part of our strategic plan as well. I like Councilmember Lewis's idea of putting some markers out there and being accountable to them. But I'm a little unclear as to what we ought to go with. The ramps are kind of easy, depending upon the money. And I guess the sidewalks aren't too bad, depending upon the money. But some of these things, like safe route to schools, I think it's very important. I'd love to see kids walking to school. And I know there's a lot of issues with parents and safety and everything else. But it's going to take a a concerted effort, I think, on our part, the committee's part, and the community's part, to come together and realize that this is a good thing. And so there's going to be a lot of discussion at PTA level and other issues. I'm not sure the committee can handle it on their own. And it almost demands a larger group, if you will, maybe perhaps a couple of council members joining with them, and to help them make the make the appropriate moves in the right direction in these multiple recommendations. So I like the idea. I'm just not sure we're ready to go with it.
If I could, on the PowerPoint that was prepared for tonight, council members, for us, I think it's on the back page. It's the second panel over on the upper right-hand side, where it says specific BPAC recommendations to consider. I think we're pretty close to an objective set and the BPAC's already put a lot of time into this. So I guess what I'm wondering is whether or not in those recommendations to consider, we have an objective set, which sidewalks and ramps fall under this umbrella. Maybe we can be more specific about that in item 3, but if we put a group together to say, to me, this is the starter, though, for that objective set, and we can start to come up with a plan against that. A lot of work's already been done. I guess I want to be careful that we don't necessarily make the process unduly long when a lot of work's been done.
I don't see in that box where the ramps would fall.
Encourage residents to walk to school and businesses. I think it should be a subheading on there that's specific, which is to increase our walks, or it could be perhaps another item. I think you're right. It could be strengthened in that regard.
It could be another. There's A through E, and it could be, add another item so you have A through F.
And these items, I'm sorry, it's outside of the physical construction. Most of these are.
Yeah.
So they said the ramps and the sidewalks of construction, you have the map, but these are additional items to be considered.
Okay. Additional recommendations. So I'm going to Tom's point is how much do we need to open it up? Still, if we've had some of our volunteers working hard at this, I wonder if we already have a nice narrowing on objectives here that we can start to point staff toward if we add it to our strategic.
Perhaps what we could do is give direction that BPAC should take a look at our strategic planning process. Maybe staff does a little bit of a presentation on how the council retreat works and what it is we do there, and then we give them charge with, because I agree with Tom, they're better set to establish the priorities, if you will, including the ramp projects, I would think, in collaboration with Mr. Mukhtari. But they come up with something that can then can segue into our strategic planning reports, and it would simply be added to the segment about increasing I've lost my place there again, but you know the section I'm talking about, that it could segue into that, and the next time we get that report, it could show up in there.
Exactly. My recommendation is, rather than thinking about the next 6 months strategic plan, the next 3 years strategic plan. That way we can have it, what we're going to do next year. Not that we shouldn't do anything next 6 months or so, but a lot of these things, it requires a lot of data collection. For example, number 1 in that box, reduce vehicle speed. I mean, we agree we should reduce vehicle speed, but first we have to identify what are the streets that the speeding is a problem, and that requires a data collection. You can't just say reduce the speed everywhere. You're not going to do that, and just to be realistic. So identifying the streets where the speed is a problem, and it requires going to Traffic Transportation Commission, it requires involving the neighborhood and the people who live on that street, because traffic calming means elimination of the parking, bulb outs, all that, elimination of parking, and it's very, very sensitive issue.
So part of what you're suggesting, if I understand, is a 3-year goal is to increase pedestrian safety, and then perhaps we figure out what the 6-month goal is, objective within that 3-year goal, which is in concert with the way we've identified other things in our strategic plan, right? So that would make sense. And then parties could work together with BPAC to determine what the 6-month goals are based on whatever the 3-year goals are, which I think are pretty well defined.
Yeah, I would just say, instead of, I don't mean to, it's not a criticism of what Mayor Grocott said, but we've got all these items. I don't think we have enough time to talk about them this evening, but it'd be a specific agenda item to we prioritize for the specific plan. I'm not trying to say that other people shouldn't get involved in it, but we did it. So let's do it again. This is part, we didn't discuss this in our specific items, so we've got some good benchmarks here. Let's identify which ones we want to put in and do it. I mean, relative to what Mr. Martelli said, obviously dollars, cents, time, some of these are easier or more expensive or less expensive and longer to get done. But I'd be more than willing to discuss this in a regular agenda item, but I don't think we're going to solve all these items tonight, and I think we can do it. I really do. They've given us the template here, I thought.
Are you talking about doing it tonight? Or
No, I'm not talking about doing it tonight. I'm talking about sending an agenda item to talk about it.
Okay.
But I think we can do it as opposed to, and again, not to be critical of what you said, but instead of sending it back and saying, well, put them involved in this, explain the strategic plan to them, well, we already went through it. Not that they're not capable of understanding it, don't get me wrong, but they've done a heck of a lot of work here, and I think they've done a lot of our work. Now we just have to identify what items we want to put in the specific plan and when we want to do it.
Okay.
That's my recommendation.
So you'll bring this back as an agenda item for discussion to...
Perhaps not all of it, but yes. We can.
In order that we can segue into our strategic planning process. Okay, let's do that.
Do we need a motion for that?
That's fine, we got the direction.
Okay, direction. Thank you. Bob saves the day again. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, that's right. Okay, item 11A is consideration of an appeal by Michael and Janina Gade to the city engineer and planning director.
Good evening, council members, members of the public. This is a fairly unusual request that you have before you this evening, so I thought what I'd do is start by highlighting what your decision-making process is this evening. The issue at hand is an appeal to the Planning Director and Public Works Director's determination that the property, 19 Stratton, is not likely to annex to the City of San Carlos within 5 years. So that's really, your decision to make this evening, whether or not that's a decision that you uphold or one that you overturn. Before you this evening is not consideration of an outside sewer service agreement or consideration of annexation. The basis for the Planning Director and Public Works Director's determination is that we don't have any evidence of the likelihood of 19 Stratton annexing to the City of San Carlos. In fact, we have some indications that it's not likely to annex because of the property at 7 Stratton, which is the closest and proximate to San Carlos. As you can see from the overhead, that property owner has voiced specific objection to annexing to the City of San Carlos. So with that said, you'd have sort of an illogical boundary line between San Mateo County and the City of San Carlos, as well as a gap between the two jurisdictions. The city staff position in terms of annexation to the city is that it's not a good candidate because, again, it creates an illogical boundary. That's why the applicant is coming before you asking for an outside sewer service agreement. Outside sewer service agreements are really for people that are not good candidates for annexation. The annexations that the city has supported or properties we've considered contiguous in the past have been contiguous throughout most of the property itself. And you can see here just sort of the handwritten purple letters indicating San Carlos. The 19 Stratton touches or borders two San Carlos properties, but it truly isn't contiguous and is not contiguous to a city street, which would be Stratton, for example, unlike 7 Stratton, which is a good candidate for annexation in our opinion. Even if the City Council were to grant this appeal request, the applicant, and this is another reason that the request is fairly unusual, the applicant would not be a candidate for an outside sewer service agreement. One of the requirements in the general plan in order to be eligible for an outside sewer service agreement, is that you be within the sphere of influence or the logical planning boundaries of San Carlos. This property, LAFCO, the Local Area Formation Commission, has indicated to San Carlos that the property is neither within the sphere of influence for San Carlos or Belmont. So this is an issue that really the Formation Commission needs to address before the city can consider that particular, this to be a candidate for an outside sewer service agreement. The bottom line in staff's opinion is that the annexation or an annexation in the future of 19 and 7 Stratton would be the superior solution to the applicant's request, but that there is a private dispute currently existing, and I should say probably over the last 8 years, between the two property owners. We've made some recommendations for methods of facilitating an agreement, and again have believed that annexation would be the superior solution in terms of a long-term planning, logical boundary, and also for a more superior waste delivery system. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, and the applicant is also here, or the appellant, I should say, to provide some information as well.
Liz, can you tell us the status of the lots along Club? Are they developed or undeveloped?
The lots along Club, I believe, are developed.
All of them?
Not all of them. I can't cite specifically which ones, but...
Okay. And there's no way that these folks will ever annex absent 7, right?
That's staff's position. Certainly, they could apply for annexation stating that they're contiguous, and that could be a discretionary issue. But again, without being within the city's sphere of influence, it seems to me that they would need to do some
That just doesn't make sense. You know, I recall our discussion in HIA and how we had 2 spheres of influence, and the property was in the county. I mean, if we don't have sphere of influence over neighboring lots, it doesn't make sense.
We would agree with you. This is an area that LAFCO has been struggling with for a while, and even called it no man's land, for example. It's an area that they are planning on master planning for and doing. There are a series of these areas that are not within any sphere of influence, and they have plans to do that, but they've got some priorities that they're addressing right now in terms of municipal service agreements and things like that. So they understand that needs to be done. I think everybody, should this property meet all of the city requirements, the city staff, LAFCO, and the applicant believe that this would be a logical jurisdiction for this property to be within. But right now, as the general plan stands today, they really don't meet the findings for outside sewer service agreement or annexation.
Are the opposite properties on Stratton developed? Do you know?
I don't. I apologize. I should have brought an aerial this evening, but...
So the only way that you could ever see them annexing absent number 7 would be to come from Cranfield. And I think those are probably paper lots that aren't developed either.
That's correct.
So they're stuck.
There is evidence that there are some septic problems at 7, so it may be that over the next 7 to 10 years that they get into a situation where they desperately want sewer service. But at this point, they could apply to the county for repairs or a replacement of the septic system.
Okay.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, 7 is not interested in annexation?
No, they've been very specific about that to us. That's the primary basis for our finding.
Liz, if the 2 lots along Club that are in the county, on the color that you provided us, they're in green, if they did annex, then the full rear property line of number 19 would be bordered with San Carlos properties. Would that constitute a reason to annex? Would that be considered contiguous even though they weren't fronted by a city street?
It would cover one portion of the general plan requirement. The other part of it is exactly what you said, which is that it be, and the language right now is not specific in the general plan about being adjacent to a city street, but it's implied, inferred, that it would be a city street. So it's not specific, but it talks about to the satisfaction and maintenance requirements of the San Carlos city engineer. So the...
if I understand it, then upon annexation, Stratton could be considered as much in the city of San Carlos as it is in the county, at least half of it to the center line.
Right, you would
Is that correct?
you would move
Because
to...
already on the, what happens, for instance, on Stratton, where on one side of the street is San Carlos, and on the other side of the street is Lot 7, how do we deal with that portion of Stratton right now?
Parvis can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically, that part of this, that would become a city street.
Isn't it already right now? It has lots 10, 16, and 22, Stratton Avenue. Those are in San Carlos, and 7 is in the county. So how do we deal with the street? One side of the street is county, and one side of the street is San Carlos?
No, the street up to 19 Stratton is in San Carlos.
Oh, okay. So my answer is that despite 7 being in the county, the whole street up to that point, that corner, that seems to be the critical touch point, is San Carlos.
Correct.
Okay. And so if the 2 lots on Club came into the city, they applied for annexation, they were granted, and then the whole rear property line of 19 would be adjacent to the city, then we might have a better argument for granting annexation, albeit it would leave Lot 7 all by itself in the county.
That's correct.
And then LAFCO would have to consider that when we applied for such a thing, right?
Yes.
But right now, if I understand your argument correctly, just a point of contact, the corners of property lines with city boundaries, does not constitute adjacency or whatever.
It doesn't reflect past practice. We really haven't.
Yeah.
And again, it's the issue of the street as well.
Yeah, okay.
Through the chair, could you give me the really short abbreviated version of why you'd want to, why 7, and again, I'm not saying you can speak for 7, Lot 7, why they don't want to be annexed? Is there a benefit or not a benefit? I'm a little confused on that. The short version?
I don't know the individual history of it, but I'm sure the applicant would be pleased to share some detail with you.
Through the chair. Annexation requires a lot of improvement to be done on the street, extension of the sewer line, there are a lot of requirements of the city.
There's cost involved.
The cost involved.
Okay.
That's why 7 doesn't want to annex.
Doesn't want to spend money to annex. The benefit is they're hooked up to the sewer system. They get to put a San Carlos address. Isn't that wonderful? But it's going to cost them X dollars to do that.
All right.
Is there any kind of structure on 7 at this point? Is there a house there, or is it?
There's a house there.
Yes.
Okay. And they're just happy to have their septic tank and be in San Mateo County?
I think the house is vacant, actually.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we're left with what we want to do with this matter.
Thank you. And you may want to see if the applicant has anything to add.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I do. Thank you. So if the applicant would like to speak.
Good evening, Michael Gadea. I could clarify probably quite a lot on this. Been dealing with this for about 6 years now, and it's been a pretty good challenge. Let me start with 7. 7, there is a house on it. No one has lived in the house for probably the last 3 years. It has a failed septic tank, and this all could be verified with the county. There was some work done on the property, illegal work done on the property, and there was several work stoppage by the county on that property. Tried to work with the gentleman on regards to annexation for at least 4 years, and we didn't go anywhere with it. He wanted to get some property from mine. I said yes. He put a lot of demands so I could get in with him, and he tried to take advantage, and I agreed to all his demands, and he still wasn't very happy with that. So at this point, I don't know what the situation with 7. Last time I talked to him, he was thinking about selling it. Like I said, no one has lived in the house for the last 3 years, and the area up there it looks like, I don't know, someone has to go up there and look at it. There's a big hole. The gentleman dug a huge hole because this probably half the size of this room next to the house to put a wine cellar on it, and the house kind of halfway caving in into the hole. And again, this could be clarified if someone goes up there. Okay, in regards to my property, We have applied with the county and for a house. It's been approved. The grading has been approved. We have enough property to put leach line on the property. It is almost an acre in size. What doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me is we have a sewer lines right on Club Drive, which is about 200 feet away. In order to us to hook up the, which actually this plan has been made to that, and I believe the city has a copy of that. It doesn't make sense to dig half an acre of a beautiful hill and tear up some trees just to put some leach lines because of some bureaucracy. We are on outside sewer, not on outside, an outside influence of the city of San Carlos. We are adjacent to some of the properties in San Carlos, and you could see some of it is, well, let me just point it out. We're in San Carlos here. I don't see what the problem is not to be in San Carlos. I don't know where to go with this. It's on the last meeting, we were supposed to come, and I believe it was Margaret Neto called me up on a Monday, and she says, you're off the meeting, and the staff is going to recommend a denial on your application. And I am here today, and I'm supposed to get a staff report on this, which I have never gotten. So I talked to Liz this evening, I believe it was, about 6:30, and she told me that the staff don't deny it again. So I'm here to you, and I don't know what question or answer I could answer for you guys, but I like to get this thing resolved so we could move on. It's been a 6-year project, and it's just been a long time.
Can you tell us the status of the lots on the club? Are any of those developed adjacent to your property?
Yes, there is home on all the properties. The only no homes is on the other side of Stratton Avenue. Actually, there's one home on it, and that's it. And the Stratton Avenue, actually, it ends. Stratton Avenue ends about right here. Actually, it's right about this way. And from here on, it's just a dirt road. All of it is just a dirt road. There's nothing up there. There is a home right in here. This is a new home that was built a couple of years ago. There is a home right there, and there's a home all around this one.
So along Club, you've got 2 city homes, a county home, a city home, a county home, and a city home.
That's correct. It's kind of a nightmare, but like I said, it needs to be resolved at some point. I mean, either we do it now or do it, 20 years from now, but it's going to have to get done at some point.
And the sewer line is on Club.
And the sewer line, the main connection is right there. And again, which makes sense is to go to the sewer line, of course. It's much better for the environment, and it's much cheaper to do it, of course, that way, and it doesn't tear the hill up. I mean, I explored putting the leach line on the hill, and it's going to take almost half an acre just to put the leach line on the hill.
So if you did get permission to do this, you would extend the line from that intersection on down to your lot?
Correct. Well, the house plan is to be right up here. This is the house map or footprint. The leach line is going to be going up this way.
Right.
So all of this area on the hill is going to have to be torn up. And some trees, there's a lot of oak trees up in there, is going to have to be torn down and ripped up just to put the leach line on it.
But how would you reach the sewer line if you had permission to do so?
It's been engineered by Triad Homes, and there's already, like I said, blueprint on that. The home's going to be built right here. Sewer line goes from here, and it's all downhill from this point all the way down to here. So it's going to be a manhole here, and rest of the main street.
So that's a downhill slope?
Correct, and from Club Drive right here, just the storage goes down.
All right, okay.
If we could annex now, we could do it right this minute. I submitted payments for annexation over, I believe, I have a check from April of 2000. That's how long ago we started doing this. And I've just been struggling with this for, now we're 2006, 6 years, and we still haven't gotten anywhere.
have a question for, I suppose, both Mr. Murtari and Mr. Rubens. Do we have any policy in place, or could we research a policy that we might want to constitute that we don't have now that allows somebody to hook up to sewer service without actually being in the city? I know we do for failures, right? But
Correct. That's the only policy. Actually, this policy of outside sewer service should be allowed if the two directors can determine the property will be annexed within 5 years. In the general plan update, we'll be recommending that policy actually be deleted, because we're not looking at only one parcel
you
here.
confused me, I'm sorry. What would be
This
deleted?
policy of that the planning director and public works director have to determine that the property will annex
in 5 years.
In 5 years. This was included in the policy for some reason that I don't want to get into now, but in the next general plan update, we will recommend that this policy will not be included, because you're not looking at one parcel. If we keep allowing these outside source connections based on public works director, planning director's determination, we're looking at a lot of other properties in Devonshire Canyon, in Palomar Park, that they all will come. So you're not looking at one parcel if you're thinking about allowing outside sewer service connection.
Thank you.
Through the mayor, one other point. Reading the staff report, I think annexation policy 51 talks about that the property is within the LAFCO adopted sphere of influence of San Carlos, and this property is not right now. So I think you'd have trouble making that finding under the current rules that you've got. You wouldn't be able to make that one. The second one you might be able to make, but I think what staff's saying is when I look at this lot, I see the reason LAFCO looks at these, and you'd create two landlocked county parcels if you brought this one in alone. So really the issue before you is the policies that we've got in place and whether or not a sewer can be extended to this property. And then there's some policy issues. One of them might be solved by changing the policies, but right now the current policies, I think, kind of tie your hands a little bit.
But if I understood Mr. McTarry correctly, changing that policy, I heard a little voice over here saying you're setting precedent, and you get this tumbling action where not just this property.
You
but
want to
suddenly-
look at it carefully, yes.
Yeah, so it has to be looked at carefully under the general plan, not under...
I'd like to add something to that also. We have, I believe Liz must have, or you guys also have a letter from Margaret from LAFCO having the full support to do an outside sewer agreement. And this not will be the first lot that actually have an outside sewer agreement. There was a precedent done with an outside sewer agreement, I believe, a couple of years ago.
But
almost the same situation.
Conditions.
So I guess my question, again, I just want to understand this. You're saying that LAFCO, you have a letter that says it's okay to do an outside...
That's correct.
But,
Do you have
having said that, if I could just, that was a comment on that question, but LAFCO won't accept it to be in their sphere of influence.
May I clarify through the mayor?
Yeah,
please do.
because I'm confused. If one hand, sounds like they're doing two things. LAFCO's doing two things.
And LAFCO supports and believes that this area would be a logical part of San Carlos. However, years ago, there was either some type of purposeful or perhaps oversight that this area was not designated as part of a sphere for any particular jurisdiction. So it's not that they don't want to support it in San Carlos. It's just that it hasn't been done yet. And they do plan on making a movement towards having this particular property within the sphere of influence, along with several others that have not been designated. Does that help? Does that answer the question?
Yes, I mean, because it sounded like it was, well, it's okay, but we don't want to...
No, they support it, but the local restrictions or the regulations are stricter than the county and state regulations. We have specific requirements in our general plan about within the sphere of influence and a series of other requirements.
Is it possible that even though this is in the county, if it was permitted to be built and if we extended the sewer, is it possible to put conditions on the property subject to the city's requirements. So, in other words, it's not in the city, but the city's requirements apply to the whatever is done there.
Absolutely, we've done that before, but the issue here is, and I think the city attorney has concurred, I don't think you could actually grant an outside sewer service agreement. So even if you granted this appeal tonight and the applicant comes back at the next meeting and asks for the outside sewer service agreement, we don't think you could grant it because it would be inconsistent with the general plan, requiring that it be within our sphere of influence.
Yeah, please.
My name is Janina Gadea. If Belmont says we're not in their sphere, their sphere of influence, and San Carlos says you're not in our sphere of influence, whose sphere of influence are we in? If we're on a borderline and no one wants to claim us, who do we belong to?
I think,
Somebody somewhere
not to
has
answer
to-
your question, but I think the planning director indicated that before, that LAFCO had indicated this is a, quote, no man's land.
Okay, it's a no man's land, but LAFCO is also working to implement it so that we do become within the sphere of influence for San Carlos. That's my understanding.
No question, but they
So-
haven't done it yet.
I understand that. But when we started this process 6 years ago, 4 years ago when we started coming up against stumbling blocks, 3 years ago, 2 years ago even, why didn't somebody then say, well, you know what, you're not within the sphere of influence? Why have we gone on and on and on and on? We have jumped through every single hoop that the planning department has requested, that the county has requested, the city council has requested, and we keep coming up against the same thing.
You've been before
And I
the
don't
city
think it's
council
fair.
before?
Yes.
Well, not over here. We had, it was with the county.
Is that the county?
Correct. We've done everything anyone has asked us to do so far, and way beyond what we should have done, and we're still in the same position. No one could give us an answer what we can and we can't do. Everybody, it seems like it keeps getting postponed, and it's, like I said, and it's been a long postponement. I believe by looking at that map, we're still adjacent to a city, at least within, as far as I'm concerned, 3 different places where we have 2 corners and we have another house behind us. I mean, why do we need to have 3 homes behind us to be in the city versus 1 home? Why couldn't it be 1 versus 2?
I don't want to get into we're not supposed to get into
No,
short back and
I'm
forth,
just gonna-
but just to answer your question, because if we did annex your property, then we landlock essentially out of the, we landlock 3 other parcels that are still in the county, but have no adjacency whatsoever to the county anymore. And that, when LAFCO allows for annexation, they look for logic. And so you have to do it piece by piece in terms of logic. And as I see it anyways, the reason I was asking the questions I did is because the 3 parcels that you would need to influence to either co-applicant with you to become part of the city of San Carlos would be the 2 lots on Club Drive, or your neighbor at number 7, or all 3 at the same time. And then you could come in a logical sense to the city of San Carlos. But currently, this little corner down here that's just a point of adjacency is not enough adjacency to have logic to your application.
We have tried getting everyone to annex at the same time. It's been an absolute nightmare. You can't have 2 people watching the same television show. No, never to get 3 people to annex to the city at the same time. With that in mind, then we're kind of locked.
You are. It's very true. You are locked.
Contiguous to the city of San Carlos, I just need a little clarification on that. Does it say anywhere how much room do you need to be touch into the city? Is there any specific number?
Yeah, in policy, there is a policy direction that we have on annexation, and it clarifies what it means by being contiguous to the city.
But does it say how much?
It's called Policy 51, doesn't it address some of those issues?
It doesn't define contiguous. it's somewhat of a discretionary call, and we've tried to be consistent with past practice. And again, there's a second part of that policy that you mentioned, which is the contiguous to the street as well.
Right.
Just in terms of history, if I could make a closing comment from staff and allow you to deliberate, Mr. Gadea has gone through years and years of different issues, but I think the message from San Carlos has been fairly clear that annexation really is a superior solution here, and that the city would not support at this current time annexation or outside sewer service agreement without including number 7 in that in the annexation efforts in any case. So that's been the staff direction in the past.
Just for clarification, and so when we discuss it, would staff consider it if the two parcels, you just said, you made the key parcel 7, but if the two parcels that aren't, there's no addresses given, but the two on Club, if they did annex, we might have some other argument for what would be considered contiguous?
You might, but you still got the issue of Stratton and the portion that's outside of the city. That would be of continuing concern to us, not having that part of the street become part of the city.
Okay. All right.
I don't understand what part.
That's true. That's true. You could then say that it was contiguous to a city street if we had a condition of approval, for example.
Well, it seems to me that's kind of what we did. That was the argument, if you will, on Devonshire Canyon.
And a number of other projects.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. Well, we need to go to discussion here and move this item on. So thank you, everyone, for their presentations. So, what do we want to do here?
Well,
we don't have much choice, do we?
It's the difficulty is what I mentioned is as Mayor Grocott said, maybe was my little voice, and I'll say it in a microphone, is the precedent that we set. Once we do this, then it's just, as you mentioned, Mr. McTarry, I think in the next general plan, you're eliminating that language, okay, which then I assume precludes your decision, planning and public works, and goes directly to the words. It doesn't even come to us. It goes to the words. There's no discretion. It goes directly in. And I'm just concerned that once if we do this, then we're setting a precedent. And I have nothing but empathy for the fact that these folks for 6 years have been trying to work this thing out. But this is a terrible piece of property that's in the middle of, I guess, LAFCO for whatever reason, and I guess they have millions of other things to do, and I'm not trying to push it off to them and make them the bad guys in this thing, but to me, almost, they're like the first ones that should be stepping up to say, yeah, that goes to where it's supposed to go. And since they're not doing it, and we're hamstrung to the fact that it's not contiguous in our past practice, and we've got that, as Mayor Grocott said, 7 of those other 2 lots are going to be like in the middle of nowhere if this is in the San Carlos. So I think our hands are tied in a lot of ways here.
If I understand the discussion correctly, we're legally our hands are tied. LAFCO hasn't defined as under the sphere of influence, and our general plan specifically states that it has to be under the sphere of influence to annex. Is that right? So I don't know that we, until LAFCO takes action, I don't see that we can. I'm completely sympathetic. I don't know that we'd have the power or the authority.
John?
Well, I'd love to be able to do it, but I don't think we can under the ordinance and the rules. So I would have to hold with the staff recommendation to deny the appeal.
And that's how I'm seeing it, too. On the human side, I would approve this in a heartbeat, but we're hamstrung. It's very, very difficult to do it. And actually, we could accept your appeal, but we wouldn't get you anywhere, because what would end up happening is, as Planning Director Cullinan said, when you come to us then for the sewer agreement, we simply couldn't agree to that. So we would get you one step closer, but we wouldn't really be getting you anywhere. We would be taking you down a dead-end road. So our hearts go out to you, but I suppose we could call some folks at LAFCO and ask them to get on it.
Well, the obvious thing, I guess, is to make a deal with your best personal friend and buy Lot 7. And you control them both. Yeah.
Having said our discussion, if I call the question,
yes,
it's not a pleasant motion to make, but I'll make a motion that we deny the appeal.
I will give a second to that.
Second.
So we've had a motion by Councilmember Grisilli, a second by Vice Mayor Davids. Roll call.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. That's a tough one. Okay, we had some items on the closed session.
One more.
Or, excuse me,
11B.
we have already. Oh, I'm sorry, did I miss something? Thank you. 11B is consideration of adopting resolution authorizing rescission of restrictive covenant provisions on 1,000 El Camino.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion, there's been a second. We're moving along quickly on this. Is there any discussion? For the sake of those watching, do we want to have some sense of presentation on this at all?
I was prepared to present to you. We could have it stand on the staff report. I could explain further if you'd like.
Can you just do a quick presentation on it?
Very quick.
Well, very quickly, the owners of the property, when they obtained a preliminary title report, uncovered this restrictive covenant that was placed in 1939. It looks to our office that the covenant was put in place to protect setback requirements that probably are not required any longer from a planning perspective, given the location of the property and the use and your prior review of this. So we're recommending that the City Council rescind the restrictive covenant requirement that was placed back in 1939.
Okay, thank you very much. No discussion, roll call?
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Okay, now that does bring us to items on the consent calendar. I think the first one is item F.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, this is an ordinance that is being brought back for adoption. In your packet, however, the report in the packet, or the ordinance in the packet, did not include a couple of the changes that were discussed and approved by the City Council when the ordinance was introduced. And so we gave you, as a first handout tonight, the revisions, or a revised ordinance that included the changes made by the City Council that added clarification with respect to notice, added clarification with respect to the definition of what would trigger the size requirement of a remodel that would trigger this particular ordinance. In discussing the ordinance in greater detail at the staff level, we thought that it might be appropriate to clarify the last couple of paragraphs under 1305.050 that attempts to determine which portion of the lateral would be the responsibility for repair by the property owner vis-a-vis the city. And to make a long story short, what we're trying to do is to write it in such a way that the city would be responsible for repairs up to the cleanout, and the property owner would be responsible for the repairs from the cleanout, including the cleanout and the valve, to the property itself. So with those adjustments, we believe that the changes are consistent with what the city council action was in the rewrite, unless the city attorney has a difference of opinion here. I believe are clerical in nature and not substantive, and still that the ordinance can be brought before you tonight for adoption if that is the wish of the city council. Parvis is here, and Jeff are both here. If I've missed anything or if they would like to clarify in any way, feel free to do so. City attorney and I have not had a chance to discuss this in the utmost of caution. I think he would probably advise that perhaps we reintroduce.
I'm afraid that's what you're going to have to do, because when I compare the language, it's more than typographic errors or word changes that might be more in line with those types of errors that are not substantive. I think in abundance of caution, it's probably better to reintroduce this and bring it up for adoption at a future meeting with these changes, if they meet your approval, incorporated in the reintroduction.
So said, so done. Thank you. Yes. Okay, well then, that brings us to item I believe. Is that right? No, G, item G. Yes, item G.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
If you'd like to reintroduce the ordinance, you need to make that motion.
I'm sorry. Maybe Bob would like to make that motion.
Make a motion to reintroduce ordinance number 1376 at a future council meeting with changes made and reviewed.
And can you read the ordinance title, please?
Just the number?
Title.
Ordinance number 1376, ordinance amending the San Carlos Municipal Code, adding Chapter 13.05 sewer relief valves.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You want to give a second?
Second.
Sure, I'd like to second it. Can I also read it? Oh, never mind. Okay.
Motion, second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Okay. So item 9G has to do with Mr. McCarty, do you want to do a quick presentation on this?
Yes, of course, the plans and specs were adopted by the City Council at the July 24th meeting. I put the project out to bid and received only 2 bids, as you can see in the staff report, one from Interstate Grading and Paving for $135,256 and one from O'Grady Paving for over $200,000. So we recommend the City Council award the contract to Interstate Grading and Paving. And in the contract, we have put in $500,000 per day incentive for finishing early, and $500 per day penalty, and $500 per day liquidated damages for finishing beyond the 15 days allowed.
Okay. Anyone else can jump in and ask questions, but since I pulled it, I'm going to jump in right now and ask some questions. The $16,000 that's was awarded on the concrete then would be added to the $135 for total project cost?
This will be the total construction cost, and there are some contingencies. Usually, we estimate maybe $4,000 to $6,000 contingency, maybe zero, but that's possible. And of course, the cost does not include preparation of design and preparation of plans and specs. Does not include construction management.
But we had a total fund for this of $198,000, so we're well within.
We are estimating, we will be well below that. We're estimating, including everything, we probably are around $165,000, $166,000.
Okay. And I would like to see what the council thinks of this. I can see the penalty phase of this, the $500, but I don't see the reason to be paying $500 a day to finish early.
You cannot have penalty unless you have an incentive, and the amounts have to be
it's a
equal.
seesaw effect then, huh? One or the other. Okay, I got it. All right. Okay. Fine. By the way, what are we replacing? What is the pipe now, and what are we replacing it with?
Well, there is a pipe there that is corrugated metal pipe, and it's very shallow. And when we lower the street, there's not much cover, so we have to put ductile iron pipe that has the strength to hold the weight.
I see. It'll be bigger,
It'll be
too?
same place, same size, but a different material.
Oh, okay. Very good. Does anybody else have any questions?
One question, Barbara, is just to visualize the end result. Is the crown of the street going to be lowered over a portion of that block or through the intersection, or how will it look?
Yeah, we're going to go back south approximately 180 feet. From there, the street starts gradually going down. At the intersection, there's going to be a major dip.
Okay.
And there are going to be signs on both sides in both directions indicating dip ahead. And that dip is much lower than the top of sidewalk, so that's where the water flows.
I noticed you just completed the ramps there as well in the intersection. Was that part of the design to move
Exactly.
on?
We did that, so we separated concrete from asphalt to expedite it. Otherwise, asphalt contractor will get the project, and he has to bring a subcontractor, wait for a subcontractor to finish the concrete before he can do the asphalt.
Okay.
So to expedite the project, we separated it this way.
At one time, there were some residents who felt that there should be a four-way stop. That's not a part of this process.
We analyzed it, and it was in your newsletter. We took it to T&T Commission, does not meet the warrants for four-way stop, and it was reported to you.
Right.
T&T Commission accepted the report.
Okay, thank you.
Just to tag on to that, I think one of the things that's very effective without doing a four-way stop, you know those little posts you have that go in the center of the street that warn people this is a pedestrian crossing?
Pedestrians, right.
I've come up on those myself driving along, and in some reason, even though it's not a stop sign, I stop because of those.
Right.
Those are very effective.
Right. These are sections where the high volume of pedestrians and no stop sign, we're going to install those.
Those are great. Okay, well, those are answered my questions. Tom, any other questions?
I'm fine.
I'd like to make a motion to award the contract to Interstate Grading and Paving.
Second. Second. Motion second. No further discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
And Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Item 9I, I pulled that. I had talked to the city manager about it primarily because there is a part in here. This is our adopting the strategic plan. And in the strategic plan, on the front page of next steps follow-up process, it says by August 28th, the city council will present the strategic plan to the public. And it was my estimation that having it tucked away under consent calendar was not sufficient for us presenting it to the public. So I had asked the city manager to be prepared to at least highlight some things, and then we were going to look at putting this on the website, the city's website. So if you just want to hit some highlights quickly on this, and understanding we will put it on the website.
Right. Yeah, as the City Council is aware, the City Council in an all-day workshop on August 14th revisited the strategic work plan. Back in February, the City Council adopted a strategic work plan, established 5-year goal or 3-year goals, and established a mission statement. We revisited each of those aspects of the strategic plan that was adopted previously. At that time, we adopted 6-month objectives that were consistent with the goals that had been established within that work plan. The task for the meeting on August 14th was to revisit the mission statement, revisit the goals, and create new objectives for the next 6 months. In addition to that, we spent some time identifying and defining what the core values for the city were pursuant to the team members that were present at the workshop, including staff members and the City Council. Just by way of revisiting that, the mission statement that has been adopted previously by the City Council and was accepted at the August 14th meeting reads that the City of San Carlos provides high-quality services and facilities in a fiscally sustainable, responsive, and friendly manner to foster a safe and healthy community. Core values that were identified include fiscal responsibility and sustainability, protecting our environment, strategic thinking and planning for the future, high ethical standards, community involvement, high-quality customer service, a strong sense of community, and public safety. the 3-year goals that were adopted, and these are not listed in priority order, and there were some changes made to the goals that were adopted this time vis-a-vis what was adopted previously. But the goals that were considered by the City Council and adopted as part of the new strategic plan include, number 1, again, not in priority order, but number 1, to increase economic development and sources of revenue. Secondly, to update the general plan and the East Side specific plan. Thirdly, to maintain and enhance public safety. Fourthly, to improve the infrastructure. And fifth, to enhance internal and external communication and customer service. Now, within each of those goals, again, those are 3-year goals, within each of those goals there are a series of specific objectives of who will do what by when. And I won't go into the details of each of those tonight unless the council wants to delve into it. But as the mayor mentioned, we do have this actually up on the website now, so it can be viewed by any of the public that would have an interest. We certainly also would make copies available at City Hall.
Very good. On the website, is it under a particular tab, or is it?
It's in the City Council section, same place it was last time, and it was put up on the 14th.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, and I appreciate the presentation. With that, I would...
I have one more comment on this.
Okay.
We're still lacking any reference to the Community Building Task Force report. And I noticed that under the second goal, we include the Natural Resources Task Force report. And I think that we should give a hearing to the community building as well.
What page are you on, Tom?
Well, it's not in there. But I'm looking at the second page, the update the general plan.
Mm-hmm.
And number 2 is the Natural Resources Task Force.
Right, by City Council. That's an action item for us.
That's
to
right.
Hold a study session on that. And so you're saying you would like to see someplace that we
received both of these reports. We basically parked them until we could get to them. We brought back natural resources, but we haven't brought back community.
So that would come under the major heading of enhance internal and external communication and customer service.
Probably would. I think that's a better spot for it.
Okay. And so if I understand your recommendation is we would add a when and who would be City Council, and we would hold a study session on community building and
the Building Community Task Force.
Yeah.
This can either be done in a study session, or a couple of council members could team with this committee and bring back a recommendation. And they did recommend things in their in their report. However, we haven't, as a council, considered or addressed those recommendations. And at this point, I'm not sure if they would come back without having them included.
So we need to bring an agenda item on a future council meeting, what it is Vice Mayor Davids is suggesting, so that we can discuss it, decide how we want to handle it, and put it on this plan, if that's what we choose to do.
If that's the pleasure of the council, what I'm hearing is it would read something like by February the City Council would hold a workshop to review the...
Or as Vice Mayor Davids has suggested, we might assign an ad hoc committee to work with them to take up those issues, and then they would bring those to us, any ones that would require action within a 6-month period. Am I right, Tom?
Yeah, we could go either way.
Yeah, we could go either way. So,
and so you're asking that this be placed on a future agenda for
discussion.
And
action, yes.
Okay. That can be done.
Okay.
Thank you. Good call, Vice Mayor Davids. Appreciate that. Any other comments on the...
No, that's all.
Through the chair, make a motion to adopt the City of San Carlos strategic plan.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to adopt the strategic plan. And roll call, please.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Item 9J.
Through the chair, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that it looks like, unless this is going to be a new record 4-minute discussion, that we extend the meeting to 10:45.
No later than 10:45?
I think we can do this in 15 minutes. I think
I do too, yeah. Okay.
I would hope we would do it in 4 minutes, but I'm just anticipating that we may not.
Second.
Okay. Roll call, do we need a roll call?
No.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Item 9J, and I would see the Public Works Director presenting this.
Well, actually, it being the job spec for the position, it's been prepared by...
City Manager, I'm sorry, yes.
This is an Assistant Director of Public Works and Assistant City Engineer classification specification. We would bring before you a resolution amending the management pay schedule to include the position. We've included within the packet the job description as has been prepared by the Human Resources Department, and so it was included on the consent calendar. The salary for the position is listed in attachment 2, set at $10,750 per month maximum, and that was established pursuant to a salary survey that was completed by the Human Resources Department.
Okay. I definitely have some questions and comments on this. Any other council members before I do so? Dive in. Okay. One of the questions I had is if I'm looking at all the tasks that this person is supposed to take up. So would this mean a reduction, for instance, supervise the design and construction of capital improvement projects and so forth? It seems like a number of items then would relieve the Public Works Director of some responsibilities or tasks or so forth. So would we expect to see some reduction in time spent from the City Engineer Public Works Director with the assistant on board?
I wouldn't think so immediately or in the very near future, and the reason for that is twofold. One is I believe that there will be a great deal of time required of the Public Works Director, City Engineer, in training and working with this person and bringing this person up to speed, passing along the institutional knowledge that Mr. Martari has and sharing that with the new person. In addition to that, I think if you look at the work program and even some of the things we talked about this evening, there are a number of significant tasks. The one that pops immediately to mind tonight, for example, is the BPAC and the conceptual plan and trying to create objectives specific to that plan above and beyond. I mean, this gives us the flexibility while we do have the staffing to tackle some of the specific projects that the City Council has deemed a priority. And the staff recommendation is that we've got the funding for the position in the budget, that we'd be allowed to utilize the positions once we get the person on board to the fullest capacity and get as much done as we can.
And the goal, if I remember correctly, is to possibly and most probably select this person for promotion upon the current city engineer ending his tenure here in June of 2008, or possibly even before that. But
this person would be in a prime position to fulfill that position once it was vacated, yes.
Okay. So then looking at that long-term goal, one of the things that I thought was a bit weak under the experience in education is, and this is, I'm not asking a question of staff, but I'm saying to the council, I'm looking at the experience in the education part, and I don't see much in regards to environmental issues or some of the things we're talking about with creeks and watershed. There doesn't seem to be any asking for experience in that area. It's just mentioned parenthetically under minimum qualifications. And so that's where I was concerned. If this person's going to be on board long term, and we are hearing from the community quite a bit, even with the Natural Resources Committee, that we should have concerns about environmental issues, green issues, etc. I would hope that this person would have some experience, even beyond just book knowledge, but maybe some experience in that area. And we might want to put that down as a qualification. Whether or not we get that person or not is another question, but at least if we put it in the call for RFQ, if you will, we might get it.
Through the chair, it says it. I apologize if I'm reading it wrong. It says including environmental engineering standards and green building techniques. I don't know how more specific it could be.
It just said, yeah, and I understand, Councilmember Grisilli, but it just simply says that have a knowledge of. It doesn't say anything about having an experience with projects in that area.
I would think that in this day and age, there'd be a lot more people. Again, from a philosophical standpoint, I think you'd have to look. It'd be harder to find people that have tons. Most of the cities, that, at least I don't know, Peninsula, I don't know that anybody's green yet. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying, it'd be great to have somebody like that, but I think we'd be looking for. Anyway, it's there. I apologize for extending this discussion.
Just to contribute to that, I totally agree with you, Mayor Rocott, that it needs to be I think given the amount of concern this council has for it, the community has for it, and staff has for it, that it'll be one of the essential qualities we're looking for. The way I read it similarly is to Councilmember Grisilli, as well as under education and experience, we look perhaps for somebody who's got some good experience in that area and perhaps even major coursework in that area. So I guess I didn't see as any of this is precluding it. In fact, it would be part of what we'd be looking for. So that's.
Well, now, let's understand something, I think, and this is a question for staff. We're approving this, but we don't actually approve the hiring. That's left up to the city manager. So I think that's why I'm looking for some strong direction or language in this so that the city manager has something to follow.
I would certainly agree that the more green, I'll use the word green just to cut through the words, that a person has would be great. But I think they have to have some idea about it. They can't not have any. I mean, they have to have, and the more they have, the better. There's no question. I would agree with that.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to staff one moment. Under experience, under education, what would be the equivalent to a bachelor's degree other than a bachelor's degree?
In some cases, it could be work experience. So many years of work experience might equate to some level of, it's fairly boilerplate language, actually, though, that is included in many job descriptions that would give you the flexibility to bring somebody on board who might be on the verge of getting a bachelor's degree, might, have tons and tons of experience, but is working classes or the like to get a specific certificate.
Mr. Chair, if I may, there are registered professional engineers who do not have a degree. That is allowed by state licensing. So that's why that language is in there.
Well, who would have thought? Okay. Well, I don't see any concern on the part of my council with...
Just comment on the specifics. I hate to get too narrow. We could have some sort of terminology of give preference to this or that, but you wouldn't want to hire a stream expert and lose out on someone who could really manage the operation long term. We're really looking at a replacement here, and if we don't pick the right fellow or gal, we'll suffer for it. I don't know. Some terminology, with preference given or with consideration given to stream, to green, to however we want to phrase it is fine, but not too heavy, because I don't want to lose the forest for the trees.
So are you suggesting we approve this with some modifying language that asks for...
Well, I don't object to modifying language, and I think that it would be fine to put something in, but not make it too strong to where the candidate must meet these qualifications or not be accepted.
So we could simply add preference would be given to the candidate with...
Or whatever. I think it'd be good to put in there, but then let it go.
Okay. Do we want this to come back then with some kind of language like that, or do you want to formulate it tonight?
I'm going to go with staff.
Yeah.
Our attempt, just through the chair, our attempt was to, through the minimum qualifications, to reflect a concern and an interest in that area. And that sends a pretty strong message, I think, if people are reading this document, if people that are applying, because I don't think you're going to find that language in many job descriptions for an engineer. We added it. It's not something that we found in the review of standard job descriptions of this nature. We added it because of the discussion here that has been held recently with the Natural Resources Commission and the Hansing San Carlos groups. But at the same time, as you've, I think, accurately pointed out, to put it in as a specific experience or educational requirement could severely limit your pool of candidates that are available to accept this position, if that truly is going to be a requirement. I mean, I think the staff has heard the message in terms of what the intent is, and we've tried to reflect that in the description to some degree. But we're concerned about, we're trying to find somebody here who has the capacity to manage people, who can fix streets, sewers, and do a lot of the hardscape that are the day-to-day responsibility of a traditional city engineer. Certainly, we can go farther, and the staff is willing to do that if that's the council's direction. But we do believe that the pool is going to be relatively limited if you want somebody who is an experienced professional in this area.
Certainly, I think we would want somebody who has great sensitivity to the issues, whether or not they understand them fully or not, but that they would have, like I say, great sensitivity to them. I'm reminded of the experience I had over when I was doing one of the BPAC tours and looking at a bicycle path that was going to be put in Pacifica, and the city engineer there was telling us about a project that was done near there that we were standing there looking at to create spawning capabilities for fish that come in from off the ocean, the trout, I suppose. The things he knew about that was just amazing to me, and to think that a city engineer was aware of those kinds of issues and very sensitive to it was quite compelling to me when I saw that. So, and I understand not every city engineer out there is going to be sensitive to those issues. But okay, so the pleasure of the council is.
I'll make a motion to adopt the Assistant Public Works Director, Assistant City Engineer class specification, and adopt resolution establishing new pay schedule for the Assistant Director of Public Works / Assistant City Engineer. Second.
There's been a motion by Councilmember Grisilli, a second by Councilmember Lewis. We still have 5 minutes. We could discuss this. I don't think anybody wants to do that. Roll call.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Thank you very much, council members. Good meeting. And no, we don't do that anymore.
Sorry, actually, that was my fault. It snuck back on.
Oh, is it on there?
Yes.
Well, do you have any public comment, Bob? Do you want to fill in? Again, you have 5 minutes? No? Okay. This meeting's adjourned.
My